Hello and welcome back to my channel The Bleach Fanfiction. Join us as we explore the world of fanfiction and fantasy and bring you the best story and discussions. This is the fourth part of What If Ichigo's Time Travel Made Him Unstoppable. By Grimlock_Bragi.so. Give this video a like and subscribe for more videos in future, so let's get into the fanfic. Hey, they freaked out last time when they realized I was a Shinigami. Should I go into Shirkai to stave that off? Nah, it would be easier while sealed. They would think you're a hostile if you appeared with Ryatsu Rippling off of ya, and they'd get confused seeing ya in your transformed state. Indeed. Alright. Thanks for the input. I slipped out of flash step as I got closer, switching to a content sprint. Let's do this. Oi. I screamed. What the hell is happening? The three Arrancar and Single Hollow stopped in their tracks, Nell's face dripping with tears and snot. She quickly wiped herself clean with her sleeve before bounding over to me. Oh, we th juth, playin' eternal tag. It th tag, but it th eternal. Holy sheet, I forgot how bad her lisp was. Wanna join us, Mithta? I guess I can for a bit. Who's it? The child waved for me to lean in, like she was telling a secret. I chuckled, but kneeled down on my left knee to get close. She shuffled closer and cupped her hands over my ear before speaking. Ith. She blurred away, as fast as she could in her child form as she screamed at the top of her lungs. You. I blinked. King, you dipshit. She did it again. I blinked again, and my gaze shot down to my hip, seeing an empty black sheath. I growled, before shooting to my feet and chasing after the giggling and screaming girl that was holding my sealed Zanpakuto. The black hilt was too long and wide for her hands to wrap around, so her fingers were grabbing onto the guard, shaped and colored exactly as the guard on my false Bankai blade. She was holding it over her head, and I was set off both because she regularly conned me into tag by stealing Zangetsu, and because she ran a heavy risk of hurting herself the way she carried it. Gimme back my sword, god damn it. The shock that Pesh and Dondochaka had been in since seeing a Shinigami appear in front of them was gone, and they laughed as they joined in the game. How do you always let this happen? Don't blame me for this. She keeps on figuring out new ways to con me. How was I supposed to know she was gonna do something basic like that? She's AF kid. They only know basic sheet. What, and I was supposed to know she was ballsy enough as a kid to just reach in and grab AF sword. I lunged for the girl, only to eat sand as she sidestepped. She did it with our fake shirkai, you dumbass, or did you forget? That was hanging off our back by a sash, that's easy to snatch. Our sealed sword was in a custom-made sheath strapped to my hip. You've either gotta be stupid or ballsy to jack a sword like that. She's both as a kid, and you know it. My fingers passed over the back of her shirt as she darted to the right, only for Dondochaka to body slam me because he couldn't slow down. I forgot, okay. I know her better as an adult. You think she'd be any different as a kid? Am I supposed to think otherwise? Kids are adults that are ignorant to consequences. You should have been watching for her to grab your sword. I silently promised to kill Pesh as I slipped on his goo, missing Nell by a few hairs. They were trying to prolong the game as much as possible, and it was pissing me off because I had already told them I was gonna play. Just grab our blade. My hollow grumbled. Not gonna be easy. I responded. She's a Fenji Weasel, and these two aren't helping. So Shuunpa, or Sonido, or Hirenkyaku. You've been running this whole time. Yeah, because we made a rule to not use speed techniques during Eternal Tag. You haven't made such a rule with this Nell. Old man reminded. Oh, yeah. I heard Shiro facepalm. I would have rolled my eyes, but he was in the right, so I settled for disappearing in Sonido. I reappeared with my sealed blade back in my sheath and Nell held aloft in my left hand by the back of her rags. I poked her in the nose with my right pointer finger. Tag! I droned. Her face melted into a pout as she crossed her arms. No fair, UTH youth the Thonado thing the big Aaroncath youth. I did, and I know a way to help you use it, too. And she was happy again, her eyes shining in excitement. Really? Mithta, UTH the Gwedeft. Yeah, before that, introductions. My name is Ichigo Kurosaki. Nel th Nel too. That th Peth, and that th Dondo Thaka, and that th Bawabua. Nice Tommy Cha, mister. My name's Dondo Chaka, don't you know? The worm-like hollow just roared in joy. I nodded. Yeah, I know. I'll explain in a sec, let me just fix something really quick. Was my response before I placed a palm on Nell's mask. Did I remember correctly, this is gonna tickle. Was the only warning any of them got before my hand glowed emerald. The child in my grasp blinked in awe and confusion, as her fraction stared in an uncomfortable combination of excitement and suspicion. Ifith how the big Arenka leun how Tathonado, she squeaked. Yes. She smiled in acceptance before closing her eyes. You're right, it thick less. Good, that meant Oriheim's theory was correct. She could feel the Ryatsu filling her body, but it was trickling out before it could do anything. So, time to do it the Ichigo way, excessive amounts of Ryatsu. Within moments, her entire body was glowing green with the healing spell. Normally, only the area being healed glowed, so either I was healing her entire body, or this is what happens when you basically shove a fire hose into a bucket with a hole in it and crank it up to full blast. I closed my eyes to concentrate on her Ryatsu, feeling it rapidly increase as the patented Ichigo method of overkill worked its magic. It worked under the theory that there would be so much Ryatsu filling the body of the patient, there would be nothing for the energy to do except heal. Didn't always work, I admit. Weaker bodies or those with smaller Ryatsu storages couldn't take it, so I reserved it for those lieutenant class and above. When Oriheim healed Nell, it took about an hour. After no more than 2 minutes, the green-haired child in my hands exploded. I was not prepared. I was hacking violently as I vigorously waved the pink smoke away with my right hand, feeling the significantly larger weight of an adult Nell in my left. Promptly, I jogged out of the cloud over to her fraction, coughing the whole trip. Once I saw the white sands and black sky, I let go of the woman in my grip and dropped to my knees. What the cough f Nell? I wheezed. Why is it cough pink smoke? How should I know? I could hear the pout in her voice. I grew really fast, so maybe things explode when they transform. I hardly blinked when I returned my gaze to her much more womanly form. On my hands and knees, I had a view up what was left of her rags, so I pushed myself to my feet quickly. It's a good theory, I'd guess. Every transformation I can immediately think of explodes into existence, so it's got some good backing. She narrowed her eyes at my nonchalance. You know, most people would be shocked when something like this happens. It's almost like you were expecting it. Yeah, I was about to get to that. C-MSTRS Neliel. Her fraction screamed as they threw themselves at. To hollows. The man looked uncomfortable, but nodded in acceptance. I smiled widely and waved for him to follow as I turned towards the exit. Great. Come on, we're about to leave. Unohana almost immediately was at my side as I jumped down to ground level. Are we really going to form such a pact with the Espada? My nurse frowned. Officially. A look of realization quickly formed over her face. Was this part of Asen's plan as well? Yup. We should really warn them of what we're going to do, by the way. That would be for the best, yes. With Ashido in tow, it barely took any time at all to return to Las Noches, and I weakly apologized to the disgruntled Arrancar that were speeding up the rebuilding process as we passed them. I still didn't know what it was, or how Aizen got a hold of it, but the entirety of Las Noches was made up of a material that rebuilt itself as long as it had Ryatsu to feed on. It was perfect in Hueco Mundo, since the air was so thick with spiritual energy that small hollows didn't even need to eat, but sometimes the damage was so great that it needed help to fix itself within a reasonable amount of time. I was the walking definition of that level of damage. I sensed some fluctuations of Ryatsu, and zeroed in on it to find something entertaining. Nell had somehow convinced Yoruchi, Grimmjow, and Halibel's Fraction to join her in Eternal Tag. Taking a guess, Yoruchi was interested the moment the term tag was mentioned. Grimmjow heard game and became hyper-focused on winning, and Halibel forced her Fraction to join as a form of training. Grimmjow was probably it, considering I could hear his infuriated screams from here as he failed at catching the goddess of Flash. Luckily, he had a pseudo-code of honor, that being, you're a coward if you abuse the fact that you're more powerful than someone else, so he was ignoring Halibel's Fraction completely. In his mind, it wasn't a victory unless he proved himself faster than the fastest person. Sadly for him, the fastest person was Yoruchi, who absolutely loved to F with people. Get the F over here, you F beach. As we came closer, I began to make out the blue-haired man's pulsing veins. Why don't you get over here, slowpoke? The mocha-skinned woman teased. An incoherent scream of rage erupted from his throat as he lunged forward in Sonido, the ex-captain easily sidestepping. Without Shuunpa. Nell was on her knees laughing, and Yoruchi's grin grew with every howl of rage from the Espada. The temptation to join them was great, but we sadly had more pressing matters. Like convincing all of the Godii 13 to not murder Arancars on sight. I cupped my hands around my mouth. Yo, we're back. As expected, Yoruchi was the first to appear before me. Thank Kami you're back, it's been so boring without you. I smirked. Don't try that with me. You've been getting off on seeing how angry you can make Grimmjow. Getting off? I'm not so sure about that, but I wouldn't mind if you checked. My face grew hot, but brutal honesty wasn't the only way I had learned to get past her teasing. So you haven't been having fun making Grimmjow lose his sheet? I never said that. The Espada in question shot at us, and Yoruchi used me as a meat shield. Not that I really minded. My arm snapped out and caught the panther Arancar around his abdomen. Down, boy. I ordered, and I saw a vein on his forehead twitch as he turned to me, snarling. I'm not AF dog, Shinigami. True. To quote my hollow, you're a pages. The goddess of Flash's breathless laughter was immediate, as was Grimmjow's BLD pressure rising through the roof. The F, did you just call me? You're a panther hollow, aren't you? The F, does that have to do with anything? Well, panthers are cats, and cats are sometimes called pussies. So you're a pages. As Grimmjow steadily became angry enough to actually explode, the ex-captain laughing behind me managed to speak. I, am so stealing the ha-hat. Just like in my time, Shiro's nickname for Grimmjow was so hilarious to her, the thought of teasing me about the reasoning completely passed her by. She collected herself just in time for Grimmjow to stop stewing in his rage and try his best to claw me. At the sight of this, her peals of laughter resumed with double the intensity. It was at this moment, with Grimmjow failing at reaching my face due to my longer arm and Yoruchi on her knees laughing, that Nell and Halibel's Fraction came to see what was going on. I really want to know what's got her laughing so strong. The former third eagerly announced. You know how my hollow has a nickname for almost everyone? The women nodded. He calls Grimmjow PP because he's a panther hollow. The reaction was instantaneous. Sunday through Sunday giggled behind her sleeve, Apache and Mila Rose openly roared with laughter, and Nell was held her stomach as tears formed at the corners of her eyes. Best of all, Grimmjow was seething. I swear to the F Soul King, Shinigami, I will F kill you. And all of you bitches too if you ever F call me that. What, PP? Sunday through Sunday, the MSTR of sarcastic teasing, asked. As Grimmjow desperately tried and failed to pry my fingers off of him, the girls laughed even harder. Of course, all of them were aware that Grimmjow wouldn't follow through with his threats, but that was part of the reason why they were laughing so strong. Although he had the power to kill Halibel's fraction, neither Nell nor Halibel would allow him, and he would rather not acknowledge that people were more powerful than he was whenever possible. As I grinned happily at the sight of the girls laughing, I caught a snippet of conversation between Unohana and Ishido. Those Arankars seem quite friendly with Kurosaki-san. The confused Hollow Slayer brought up. Ichigo is a surprisingly charismatic person. My nurse explained. I see. What are we waiting for, if you don't mind my asking? Some of the Arankar are to accompany us in returning to the Siriidii, to discuss the treaty. Ah, understood. Thank you for answering my question, Unohana Taicho. You are very welcome, Ishido-san. We didn't have to wait long, as Halibel, Stark, and Lillinette joined us after a few minutes. Hey, could you come over here for a second before we get going? I asked the present Arankar. Without complaint, luckily, they joined me in a small huddle a small distance away from Ishido and Unohana. My nurse was performing the duty of ensuring Ishido didn't catch on to the fact that the treaty was bullshit. What is it? Halibel asked. So, a little bit to convince Ishido, and a little bit to keep the Shinigami calm until they get used to you, I am gonna tell the Godii 13 that we struck a deal with you. Understandable, go on. I'm gonna tell them that we are gonna make a treaty where the Shinigami promise to leave you alone so long as you bottleneck the Hollows escaping Hueco Mundo. And how long will this ruse continue? Until the Godii 13 isn't looking for an excuse to murder you all. The blonde Arankar sighed, and rested her forehead in her right hand. This is going to be annoying, and troublesome, but I will bear with it so long as you promise that they will abide by the treaty. If any Shinigami don't, come to me and I'll personally make sure they regret it. Although I have no doubts you could handle it yourself, it would give the more unsavory Shinigami an excuse to doubt you. Another sigh escaped the tanned beauty. Seeing as this is the best we can get for now, I will accept it. But know that I will not. She quickly dodged out of the way, her face tinted red. Don't jump at me when I'm dressed like this. My clothes are barely staying on as is, I don't want to accidentally flash anyone. I'll hug you when I've got some proper clothes on, but not when these are ripping at the seams. She shouted. I laughed and pulled off my shihakusho. You don't need to wait long, then. I'm only wearing this until my actual clothes finish getting cleaned, so I don't mind giving this to you. No, you keep it. It can get really cold here in Hueco Mundo, you'll need it if you're not accustomed to it like us Hollows are. Trust me, the cold isn't an issue for me. I'm part hollow. Her eyebrows furrowed, but she tentatively took the offered top and slipped it on. She tied it shut with an extra sash I had on hand. It was tight around her chest, and the sleeves slipped past her hands, but the bottom came up to her mid-thigh, keeping her mostly modest. You are explaining that, right? She asked. I nodded. Yeah, I'll talk as we go over to Las Noches. We can go inside. Yeah, I kinda took it over. You felt all those tremors earlier, right? No way was that you. Sure, espadas can obliterate Las Noches, but that's if they actively try, and it would leave most of them pretty tired. She accused. I rolled my eyes. I'll explain on the way. Come on, we have a lot of ground to cover and I still have more stuff to do. So let me get this straight, Pesh began as we neared the outer wall of the domed country. You, Ichigo Kurosaki, are from about 10 years in the future. I nodded. Where you came from, there were 2 horrific wars that pretty much occurred consecutively. I nodded again. Everything went to shit, so you traveled back in time to make sure none of that happens. Yep. And we became allies during the first war, so you're trying to get that to happen again. Well, I just did that, but yeah. Am I missing anything? You left out the part where he can probably take on all of the Espada at once and come out unscathed. Nell brought up. That was on purpose. Everything else is difficult, but believable. Him being that monstrously powerful just cannot be true. I shrugged at his doubt. Anything I can do to prove it to you? Destroy the moon. Pick something else. Nell and I shot down in sync. What about the mountains? Those are really huge, don't you know? Them all or a few? I asked. Can you destroy them all? Nell asked. If I went Bankai, in one hit. In Shikai, though, it would take some time. As doubtful as I am that you're that powerful, I would rather you not destroy a significant portion of Hueco Mundo where many hollows reside. Fine by me, some people that can back up my claim are on their way here. The Verdette raised an eyebrow. And who would those be? The remaining Espada, my nurse, and a workat. You have odd friends. No offense, it's just surprising to see. None taken, I get that a lot. Oi, Shinigami. Grimmjow bellowed as he came within hearing range. The F was that Ryatsu search for? You know my name, at least call me Kurosaki. That doesn't answer my question, Shinigami. Can I plea dash? After we get Ashido. We've probably already spooked him enough. I was fixing Nell. That makes it sound like something was wrong with me. The Aaronkar in question pouted. Your mask was broken in half, and your Ryatsu was pouring out of you like mine was before someone drilled it into me how to control my output. And that was so bad that I gave 2 different people powers and made half my school spiritually aware. It wasn't that bad. You turned into a kid. Red blossomed onto her face as she grumbled to herself with her arms crossed under her bust. I couldn't make out the words. My quickly growing horde of friends and acquaintances stopped in front of me. Yoruchi looked appreciatively at Nell, whistling lowly. Boy, Ichi-kun, aren't you fast? Been gone an hour and a half and she's already wearing your clothes. Nell's blush deepened. I didn't have anything else to wear, my previous clothes were ripped to shreds. She didn't yet realize it, but Nell just made a terrible mistake. I could already tell by the mischievous grin growing across the werecat's face. I can only assume Ichi-kun here did that, right? He did. It was fascinating watching someone dig their own grave. And what did he do, if you don't mind me asking? He shoved his Ryatsu into me, and I exploded. The goddess of Flash's grin was on par with Shinji's. And how did that happen? He grabbed me by the back of my shirt, held me up, and grabbed me. My eyes widened in horror. Yoruchi would need to stop soon, because Halibel was glaring at me with the intent to kill. At least Unohana seemed to understand what actually happened, because she was smiling behind her hand like the traitor she was. What happened before he grabbed you? Nell blinked, and bashfully looked away. I grabbed his Zanpakuto. Now Halibel was staring in shock at the former third, while Yoruchi was having the time of her life. Was it big? Yeah, actually. I couldn't wrap my fingers around it. So, you're telling me you grabbed his big sword, he grabbed you, ripped your clothes, shoved his Ryatsu into you, and you exploded. Confusion crossed the Verdette's face. No, my clothes ripped when I dash. Her face suddenly turned a whole new shade of red. Hold on. It's not what it sounds like. I stole his blade so I could play a game of tag with him, and he sonido to take it back. He held me up in the air so I wouldn't run away again, and then healed me by flooding my body with his Ryatsu. I exploded when my body finished healing, and the clothes I was wearing up until that point didn't fit anymore. Oh, I knew the whole time, it's just that you were making it so easy. The former 3RD's face was red, now for an entirely different reason. You knew. How? Ichigo informed us that you had been attacked by Noitora and reduced to a child due to your leaking Ryatsu. Unohana supplied. He also informed us that he was going to return you to your adult state by outpacing the rate at which your Ryatsu escaped you. Nell seemed to be at a loss for words. You'll get used to her. Eventually. I pacified. She slowly turned to me. Which one? Both. Mostly Yoruchi. Hey. The mocha-skinned goddess cried. That wasn't an insult, and you know it. I know, but I couldn't just say nothing. Yes, you could've. But that'd be boring. Cut it with the boring CRP, this is the most fun you've had in over 100 years. My eye twitched. Which is exactly why I don't want it to end. When I'm around, things don't get boring, you should already know that. Even exciting things get boring if they stay that way. She tried. Only if the level of excitement stays the same. I countered. Does that mean things only get better from here? Probably. The ex-captain cheered in joy. Is this how you are with everybody? Stark asked, his exasperation failing to hide his joy from me. Only with her. I'm loud with a couple other friends of mine, but that's more like play fighting. For most everyone else, I'm pretty quiet. Oh, so I'm special. The workcat teased. Yes. She froze, a stunned smirk stuck on her face. As I had learned over the course of the wars, being blunt and honest stopped her teasing in its tracks. Sadly, that method was situational at best. Being friends with you is going to be exhausting, isn't it? The only natural Arrancar I've ever met asked. Depends on whether you're gonna stick next to me the whole time or not. I know some guys you'll love to spend all day with, they like relaxing and taking in the moment. When can I meet them? I've gotta go grab a Shinigami over in Minos Forest, and then we're going back to the Soul Society. You can join us if you want, but it's like the middle of the night there, so you'll have to wait until morning for introductions. Fine by me. The first yawned. I'd like to journey with you as well. Halibel spoke up. Great. I accepted. Girls, do you wish to go as well? The trio took a moment to exchange glances. Not yet, Mstrs Halibel. This is all a bit sudden for us. Sunday through Sunday spoke for the three of them. I kept my gratitude in my head, as I wasn't sure Unohana's place would have had the room for all the extra guests. I shall remain in Hueco Mundo. Someone needs to keep the trash in check until a leader returns. Ulquiorra announced, speaking for the first time throughout the entire conversation. Grimjow grunted before leaving, obviously disinterested. Shiro cussed in disappointment in my inner world. It's fine, you'll get your chance. We are fightin', Gramps, right? Whether he wants to initially or not. I soothed. The hollow huffed in acceptance. I brought my attention back to the Arrancar and Shinigami around me. Okay, then. Unohana, you're coming with me to talk to Ishido. Oh. If a single Shinigami came to tell him he can finally leave, he'd either think he's hallucinating or being tricked by a hollow. If there's a pair of Shinigami and he can only recognize one, that removes the possibility of a trap and a hallucination from his head. How do you figure that? Pesh asked. If Ishido were hallucinating, he'd either see someone he didn't recognize because his mind would think of a random Shinigami that just stumbled upon him, or someone familiar because he'd think they came to save him. If he hallucinated two people, either they'd both be familiar, or both be random. Furthermore, if one were a captain, he'd make the connection that the Godiai 13 found a way to travel to Hueco Mundo and stationed a squad there to keep hollow numbers low. Not that that's what happened, or that I would even allow that to happen, but it's what he would think. Why don't you just tell him that you're from the future, and that you came to get him out? The loincloth-wearing Arrancar asked. Because he's already mentally unstable and he would definitely think he's lost his mind if we come in saying that. That's smart, don't you know? I cuffed the polka-dotted Arrancar across the back of his head. The F you mean by that, you tiki mask dumbass? I'm just complimenting you, don't you know? Mstrs Neliel, make him stop. You dug your own hole, you can dig yourself out of it. Shiro cackled inside my head at that. Ah. Pesh, give me a hand, will ya? Wah. But I'm so thin, and fragile. He'll snap me like a twig. Don't worry, I'll provide moral support. Shiro's cackling erupted into laughter at the blatant abandonment of Dondochaka. The Aaron-car in question screamed in fear as he tried to protect himself. I didn't mean anything by it, I swear. Watch your words next time, and you won't have to convince me of that. Unohana and I stood at the base of the pillar housing Ishido's cave. You're sure this will work? She asked. Of course, Asen came up with it. I assured. You have an enviable amount of faith in your Zanpakuto. They've saved my butt on dozens of occasions, and they only want to protect me. Why wouldn't I have faith in them? My companion was silent for a moment. I wish to have such faith in Minazuki one day. Sadly, I do not share the same relationship with my Zanpakuto as you do yours. I snorted. I haven't met anyone who does. Even back in my time, no one ever got as comfortable with their Zanpakuto as I am except Zaraki, but that's a different situation. Sure, some Shinigami allowed their Zanpakuto to manifest, but never as often as I do mine. You have the energy to keep your spirits manifested for far longer than the average Shinigami. She tried to play devil's advocate. There's a difference between taking your Zanpakuto out for a walk and actually hanging out with them like I do. It became as common to see Shiro or Asen running around the Siriidii as it was to see me, to the point that they actually have their own relationships with Shinigami. Asen and Chojiro have conversations over tea, and Shiro somehow is best friends with Momo. The raven-haired medic's eyebrows furrowed. That is, difficult to picture, taking into account you having slain the man she worshipped. Yeah, but it's a thing. Hell, he helped her out of her depression. Impressive. My nurse gaped. Right? I sensed Ishido's signature fluctuate as he woke. Ah, sorry to cut the conversation short, but Ishido just got up. I see. Lead the way, then. I quickly hopped up to the cave opening, putting on a curious face as I lifted the tarp hiding the abode from prying eyes. Hello. I called, faking searching for someone. The hollow hunter appeared before me with his sword drawn, his body covered in hollow masks. Who are you? How did you find me? He demanded. I prayed my shocked look was believable. Where is your shirt? I sensed Shinigami Ryatsu a little bit ago. I told the head captain and he sent a captain to investigate. I was just showing her the way here. You didn't answer my other questions. He growled. I'm Ichigo Kurosaki, from the 4th Division. And I gave it to somebody that looked cold. Bring the captain up. I turned my head towards the entrance. Anohana Taicho. The Shinigami I sensed is here. Anohana Taicho. She's here? The brunette asked, his blade lowering slightly. Indeed I am. The woman answered as she joined us. Shock and disbelief filled Ishido's face as his sword arm fell. Wow dash. I believe Ichigo has already explained, has he not? Of course I did, but I think he's been here a while, since I don't recognize him and this place looks pretty set up. From the look of it, he's alone too. Hey, how long have you been here? I don't know. I stopped keeping track what's felt like centuries ago. How long have you been alone? Almost the whole time. Unohana hummed mournfully. You are not sure if this is real, aren't you? I hoped the fake surprise on my face was believable, and turned to see the legitimately stunned brunette. You are correct. The man breathed softly. Is there any way for us to prove this is real? He shook his head sadly. Some of my hallucinations have been frighteningly intricate and realistic. I usually can only tell it's fake when I wake up. The medic frowned. Then I am sad to say the only method we can take is to return you to Soul Society and pray you may eventually accept it as reality. Ishido frowned. Even if this is real, my role here is important. I can cull the number of hollows escaping Hueco Mundo. I perked up at that. Actually, we're in the process of doing just that. Unohana glanced at me in a silent question of, what are you talking about, so I kept going. We're working on making a pact with a group of powerful Arrancar. It'll be a peace treaty, where we promise to not kill them so long as they reign in the hollows as best they can. I could sense her confusion, having not heard of that until just now. That sounds risky. The brunette before us reasoned. Did you miss the part where I mentioned we would kill them if they didn't abide by the treaty? You of all people should understand how important survival is. Tolerate. Disrespect. Didn't expect you to. That's all for now, I'm gonna go open a garganta while you say your goodbyes. I stepped away as Halibel turned to her fraction. I waved for Unohana and Ishido to come closer as I shoved my hand into the air, ripping open a void between worlds with the brunette watching. The Hollow Slayer blinked in shock and disbelief. Ichigo's Zanpakuto grants him the ability to mimic the powers of hollows and quincies. It's difficult to get accustomed to, but possible. The raven-haired medic soothed. It is how we have managed to form a treaty at all with the Arrancar. The stunned Shinigami nodded dazedly. I sensed Halibel, Stark, Lilynette, and Nell come up behind me as Yoruchi hopped back up onto my shoulders. Years ago, when I had asked her why she loved sitting on my shoulders so much, she had explained quite enthusiastically the many reasons why. Apparently, my shoulders were comfy, my hair was soft, I extruded an aura of safety, she knew I wouldn't allow her to fall, it granted her a great view, I had looked at her suspiciously at that, my body was warm, and it was common knowledge that I never minded my friends being in my personal space. I had begrudgingly accepted all of that, while choosing to not inform her about how my closeness with my friends was more of a coping mechanism than a preference. The closer they were, the more sure I was that I could keep them safe. Alright, everybody ready? I asked, a chorus of confirmations sounding around me. Then come on, Soul Society's waiting. Was my answer as we entered the Garganta, the familiar road of a sideways skyscraper stretching out into the abyss. While I understand they do not have many other places to stay, I am unsure if my home can accommodate this many people. Unohana announced, a well-hidden frown on her face. I got this, I've been thinking about the arrangement the whole trip here. I pacified. Having known that night had already fallen in the Siriidii before I opened my Garganta, I had placed the exit inside my nurse's living room. Stark can sleep anywhere, so he can take the recliner in the living room. Lilynette usually uses him as a pillow, so she's set. Nell or Halibel can take the couch, and whoever doesn't take the couch can have the spare futon. And if Isane-chan has a nightmare? Don't act like you don't enjoy having Isane join you. I know you do. A pout formed on the raven-haired medic's face at being caught. Fine. But what of Shihoin-chan or Ishido-san? Yoruchi uses me like a pillow, and as for Ishido, would you be able to sleep around Arrancars if there's Shinigami around? I'm not sure. What if one of those Shinigami was awake? Unohana side-eyed me, with a look on her face that I was sadly familiar with. It was a look that meant she morally disagreed with what I was doing, but logically understood that it was for the best. While it wasn't a guarantee, it was highly likely that I would suffer a nightmare if I went to sleep, and we couldn't have that if we wanted Ishido and the Arrancar to trust us. Not with how I woke up after those. Probably. The Hollow Slayer answered. Great. You're taking the last futon. I'll be keeping watch in a corner. I clapped my hands, and everyone went over to where I directed them. Halibel took the couch, Nell wanting to be in Unohana's bedroom where I was. Ishido had pulled his futon up to a wall, as far as possible from Nell. Luckily, the vedette was perfectly understanding of his avoidance of Arrancar. I sat in my favorite corner, since it gave the best view of the sunrise from inside Anohana's home. Yoruchi curled in on my side, with my arm around her. It's not fair that you can be shirtless in the coldest of the three worlds and still be this warm. The mocha-skinned beauty mumbled. I smiled. Are you complaining? I whispered, as Nell was already asleep and Ishido was halfway there. He kept on waking himself up whenever Nell moved in her sleep, realizing it was just typical tossing and turning, and then shifting under the blanket to try sleeping again. No, it's just that you're making not jumping you difficult. I blinked, before a gentle smile made its way onto my face. Her head was tucked onto my chest, so she didn't see it. There were many things I wanted to say to that, but I had to wait. Partially because right now wasn't the time to say those things, but mostly because my head was getting in the way. I don't think I'll ever believe I'm deserving of them. Especially not if I've already failed them once before. Definitely not with the things I've done. They had kept on insisting, though, so I had eventually took to ignoring the voice of my doubts and insecurities. It was harder to now than ever before, both because it was louder than ever and I didn't have their reassurances to distract me. I gently rubbed Yoruchi's shoulder and she snuggled deeper into my side, her breathing evening out and softening as she dozed off. I listened to it for a moment, checking that she was indeed asleep and not faking it like she had dozens of times before. Once I was sure, I shifted my gaze over to my nurse, who was sitting up, staring right back at me. Everyone else is asleep. I spoke quietly after a moment. Do you know where your friends from the human world are? She questioned, easily keeping her voice soft. I raised an eyebrow, opening my mouth as I spread my Ryatsu sense to confirm what I already knew. Chad's with Kairaku, Yuryu has pulled Nimue Awa dash. I stopped mid-sentence. I spread my Ryatsu sense once more. They left the other day. The medic confirmed. From what Isen-chan informed me, they wished to ask you to leave with them, or at least say their goodbyes in person. They could not find you, though, and so Ishida-san convinced them to leave, stating that you would return to the world of the living in due time. At least, that's what I heard. I gaped in shock, utterly speechless. In my time with you, I gathered you to be the type to keep a constant track of your friends. I am. I stuttered. She waved it off. It is fine, I have already understood what occurred, and I believe you simply haven't realized it yet. You are still living in a war. You drink coffee, which you seem to dislike, but wakes you up quicker than tea, so you are more aware if an enemy attacks. You are constantly on guard, and give out orders as if expected to. And, most importantly, you don't watch for Ryatsu of people you assume are dead. My eyes widened, and a chill flooded through my body that pierced all the way to my bones. I didn't realize. As I said, it is fine. It's easy to understand why you put no thought to not sensing your friends, if they are still dead in your mind. There are other quirks I've caught, such as your focus on busying yourself. I gulped at that. Yeah, I didn't realize I was ignoring the signatures of my friends, but I was fully aware of the second thing she pointed out. I was doing it on purpose, after all. The question is, why? I have some theories, the most believable being that you are trying to keep yourself from absorbing the situation. I didn't speak, which she caught. Correct me wherever I am wrong, then. The immature, rebellious part of me wanted to go against her. The rest of me, Zangetsu included, knew it was for the best if someone was helping me out. You are trying to not allow yourself the time to think, to take in that those you have lost have returned. You recognize both that your task is of the utmost importance, and that if you take in that they are here once more, you would be distracted from that task. Furthermore, the busier you are, the easier it is to push your conscience to the side. You've taken many lives in the wars, but you haven't taken any of that in. If my deductive skills have not stagnated, someone recognized your heart, informed you of how devastated you would become upon taking your first life, and you chose to not acknowledge any of the lives you took because you couldn't put yourself out of commission when you are so needed. Swallowing the bile that had been steadily crawling up my throat, I nodded. My nurse's face softened, and she came close to rest her right hand against my left cheek. Ichigo, her voice was gentle, calming my nerves and soothing my panic. We have 3 years to prepare, and in 3 days you have already recruited an entire force of lieutenant class and stronger allies, broke me out of my shell, and assisted 2 captains in learning to use their Zanpakuto. You can come to terms with what you had to do. We'll have the time. God damn it. Why did she have to be so good at telling me what I needed to hear? I struggled to not lean into her hand, but I eventually gave in. A sigh escaped my throat, and my eyes closed in some vain effort to keep the tears in. I will. And soon. Just not yet. Let me at least get the ball rolling on everybody's training. Let me get everyone to a point where they know what to do. Then I'll do it. I opened my eyes, meeting her blue orbs. They were slightly downcast, but at the same time had a slight pleased gleam to them. For now, I will accept that. But if it takes too long, I will stop you. Another sigh left me. Before. My lips curled into a barely managed smile. Wouldn't expect anything less. Unohana returned to her bed, and lay down to sleep as I rolled my head to stare out the window to the night sky. The people sure betrayed the joyous feel it was claimed to have, but the sights definitely portrayed the Soul Society as the heaven it was supposed to be. I engrossed myself in taking in the framed sight to pass the time, finding comfort from Yoruchi curled in on my side and Unohana being the epitome of elegance as she slept a few feet away. The only time I was ever dragged out of my reverie was when the goddess of Flash pulled my arm to her chest in her sleep. The position was slightly uncomfortable, but the sight of the purple-haired woman's face in completely relaxed bliss more than made up for it. I couldn't say how long I watched her after that, but I stopped when the golden rays of the rising sun shined upon us. It was entirely because I knew what would have happened if I didn't look away that I forced myself. She was far too appealing like that. Though it did allow me to think clearly enough to remember the new habit I wanted to form. Because there was no way in hell that I was waking Yoruchi as she was, I carefully slipped my hand from her grip. The urge to return it was great when I saw her reaching out for it, and gently picked her up in a bridal carry. The sight of her curled up in my arms with her head against my chest as she slept was one of my favorites. I stood up silently, mentally thanking the werecat's stealth training. I kneeled down next to Unohana, and I nearly had to ask Zangetsu for help in shaking her awake because it was not fair that she could be that breathtaking with her hair loose. Fortunately, she woke easily. Unfortunately, the half-lidded look she gave me with her hair draped around her as she leaned up halfway made my mind go blank. Yes? She asked sleepily. Sunrise. Sunrise. Understanding filled her eyes as she nodded and sat up completely. I left the room as she changed. I swore I could hear her amused chuckle as I shut the door with my foot. As I silently traveled past the living room full of sleeping Arrancar, Orochi's breath ghosted across my bare chest, sending goosebumps across my body. I mentally thanked the Soul King that no one around me was awake to see my reaction. I then mentally cussed, because I would need to hide that reaction before the first Kenpachi finished getting dressed. I distracted myself by making breakfast, shifting Yoruchi to my left arm so I could cook. It was easy carrying her with one arm, as I was strong and she was light. It always fascinated me how she could hit like a freight train but still be as light as a feather. Shifting my focus from that topic, I started a pot of coffee, with a few extra cups thanks to Zangetsu reminding me of the preferences of the Arrancar with me. I got the rice started, and then turned towards the eggs to see Unohana, with her back to me, in front of the stove and cracking the eggs into the pan. Her hair was still undone, she was wearing only a shihakusho, and a chill dancing down my spine told me it was all on purpose. Oi, King, take a closer look at the shihakusho. Shiro's voice was filled with amusement, and thus I was filled with dread. I did as told, and I was sure she heard my resulting gulp. The top she was wearing was mine, and I could tell because it was incredibly oversized. The sleeves were rolled up to the elbows, the bottom reached her mid-thigh, and a sash was tied around her abdomen, clearly to display a figure we both knew she had. She glanced at me from over her right shoulder, and all of what she was doing should be illegal. I assume you are wondering how I found out. That was not at all what I was wondering, but that was a good question. I nodded. Like how I understood your habits, it became rather obvious once I had enough clues. For example, your refusal to inform either Shihoin-chan or I of who your first time was, your lack of answer upon my asking if you would have more than 2 partners, and your reaction from my compliment in our bath. What set it in stone for me was your reaction just now when you woke me. So, you are aware that you, Shihoin-chan, and I were in a relationship in your time? Yes. A glint manifested in her eye that was halfway between mischievous and sadistic. Will I be teasing you like this until that occurs again? Yes. Shiro started laughing. Oh God, no. When she turned around to grab some seasoning, I was stuck staring at the purposefully displayed cleavage until she faced the stove once again. She knew exactly what she just did, and I knew she was going to enjoy every second of it. Considering she was definitely aware that I intended to hold off until I allowed myself a break, this was going to be hell. It was painful to continue cooking with her, mostly because we both knew I was too stubborn to stop helping her out with breakfast and she was taking full advantage. The definitive worst moment was when she climbed atop the counter to grab something overhead and showed off that my shihakusho was the only thing she was wearing. The old man was my only saving grace, helpfully reminding me that there were waking Aaronkar in the next room. Shiro was the opposite. He repeatedly reminded me that Yoruchi was in my arms and would more than happily join in on any fun Punohana and I got into. It was difficult, and highly straining on my impulse control, but I held out long enough for Stark to walk into the kitchen. What's that smell? He asked. I sent a prayer of thankfulness to the Soul King, because while having company wouldn't deter the first Kenpachi in the slightest, it made it leagues easier to rein myself in. It's called breakfast. I answered the wolf Espada, who had a really weird first name considering. It's a meal for waking up, to give you the energy to last the day. Or at least until lunch. The Aaronkar hummed in interest. We never had anything other than tea with Aizen. I'm aware. That's one of the reasons why you and the other Aaronkar are joining us. The raven-haired medic squeezed my butt as she passed me, and it was infinitely easier to not smack hers in response as I continued talking to Stark. Why are you holding that woman? He asked, clearly having forgotten Yoruchi's name. I'm holding Yoruchi because she was sleeping on me, and I didn't want to wake her up. Can I trade you for Lillinette? I laughed, making to keep the volume down as the workcat mewled in my hold. Sorry, but no. You don't want that anyway. I'd wake you up if I saw you were sleeping during the day. A small whine crawled out of the brunette's throat. Why does no one let me sleep? I waved off his complaint. Don't worry about it, the guys I'm gonna introduce you to today will let you sleep just about all you want. You promise? Yep. Alright, I'll hold you to that. Fine by me. Care to help us bring out the food? We made enough for everyone. The man scratched the back of his head lazily before shrugging. I smiled widely and held out a plate for him to take. It took 2 trips with the 3 of us, and we set it all up in the living room since that's where the most people could comfortably sit. As I came out with the pot of coffee, Halibel sleepily sat up on the couch. It was funny, how ironic it was that the person who slept all day was wide awake and the woman who ran an entire realm was the opposite of a morning person. She wasn't attacking anyone, but she was glaring at everyone. That lasted until I pushed a cup of coffee in front of her, with milk and sugar in her preferred amounts already added. I nearly laughed out loud at the faces Stark and Lillinette made upon seeing Halibel pull down her collar and open the gleaming jaws of her mask. There was an utterly satisfied sigh from the tanned woman after finishing her first sip. Since when could you do that? The lime-haired Aaronkar asked. Always. Why didn't you do that before now? No reason to. Do the trace bestias know about it? Yes, now quiet. The child Aaronkar squeaked before slapping a hand over her mouth. Stark watched all of that, stunned beyond belief. I chuckled before shaking Yoruchi a little. She groaned and tried to press herself further into my chest, so I shook her a little more. 5 more minutes. She pleaded. But then you'll miss breakfast. I prodded. I'll steal some from the 4th Division. I mean, you can, but the 4th Division doesn't have food made by me. She stopped moving for a moment, and I heard a sniff right before she snapped to face the food. Nearly instantly, she slid out of my hold and sat to my right, opposite Unohana. The medic was sitting on the couch to the right of Halibel, I was sitting at the head of the coffee table, and Yoruchi was to the left of Stark and Lillinette on some chairs dragged over from the dining room. Drink at your leisure, but hold off on the eating until I get Nell and Ishido over here. I ordered as I stood. Entering the bedroom, I was greeted by a hilarious sight. Nell had a habit of clinging to people in her sleep, and she had somehow crawled across the room to lock her arms around Ishido's abdomen. Meanwhile, what nearly made me burst out laughing was how Ishido was awake, his arms pinned to his sides and the most helpless look on his face that was directed at me. I snickered, which caused his pleading look to shift to a glare, and I came over to help him. It was only slightly difficult to pry Nell off the Hollow Slayer, thanks in no small part to my hollow strength. Once the Soul Reaper was free, I slung the verdette over my shoulder, earning a look of bewilderment from Ishido. I silently waved for him to follow as I sauntered towards the living room. The man mutely did as I asked. Well, gestured. Without bothering to explain in any sense of the word, I dumped the former third next to the soon-to-be queen, startling everybody. Yoruchi started, only to be cut off by Nell spontaneously springing to life and grabbing some chopsticks. Nell only wakes up to food. I enlightened. No, she wasn't faking being asleep. No, I don't understand it. Ishido, you can take the seat next to Unohana. I realized after the fact that I forgot to add a formality to Unohana's name. I didn't bother to correct myself. As Ishido sat where I last was, and I sat between Nell and Lillinette, the two had gotten into an eating contest, which I expected. I caught my nurse pouting at me. I knew she would pull some sheet if I had sat next to her, it just so happened that an opportunity arose. That opportunity being that Ishido would be more comfortable sitting between Shinigami than he would sitting between Aaronkar. Nell only wakes up to food? Yoruchi asked. I nodded as I sipped my coffee. Yup. Even if we got attacked, she would sleep right through it. My eyebrow twitched as a memory resurfaced. I heard Shiro cackle in my mind at the memory, and Asen sigh. I eventually learned that that doesn't limit itself to physical food. Just shouting out names will wake her up. I feel like there's a story behind that. The workcat prompted. Ishido looked thoroughly confused, but I was too irritated by the memory to tiptoe around him. We once got attacked in the middle of the night, in a camp in Hueco Mundo. We weren't in Las Noches, it was still Aizen's territory, so going in was suicide. It was a stealth squad full of Onmitsukido, with Nell and I acting as guides/guardians. We were all asleep, and Aizen's Aaronkars came at us. He found out where we were because we only destroyed the sensors around us, he just had some lackeys target the dead zone. My tent was the one that got blasted, they probably recognized me as the strongest and tried to take me out before I could do some damage. They failed, obviously. Anyway, I'm set as sheet, smoking and with nothing but my hakama having survived the Siro assault. Onmitsukido are running around, tents have blasted away from the air pressure, and I see Nell dead asleep on a sheet, holding her Zanpakuto like a stuffed bear. Next to nothing the Onmitsukido are using even scratch the Aaronkar around us. I know that Nell doesn't wake up unless there's food involved, and I'm not thinking straight, so I scream at the top of my lungs, omelets, and she jumps to her feet, drool coming out of her mouth, and asking where the hell the food is. She got her bearings pretty quick, though, and we defeated all the Arankar, so I think I can go back to sleep, only for her to turn to me and ask, I thought there were omelets. Everyone around me was laughing by the time I was done with my story. Ishido was still thoroughly confused, but he was also still entertained. Nell's laughter was far more nervous, but that was drowned out by both Lillinette and Yoruchi pounding the table as they howled. Unohana was giggling behind a hand, and while Halibel's laughter wasn't audible, I could see it on her face. Stark was chuckling. What probably pisses me off the most about that is that the Shinigami started calling it assault on Camp Omelette. I gave up threatening people to stop calling it that when Kairaku called it that during a captain's meeting. The laughter doubled. I nearly FNG stabbed Renji when he ran into a fight, screaming omelettes as a battle cry. I distinctly heard Yoruchi wheeze. The only reason I didn't was because about 3 dozen Shinigami followed him, screaming the same thing. An amused chuckle escaped Halibel, as Nell clutched her sides and Stark bellowed out in laughter. You have more tales such as that, don't you? Unohana teased. I raised an eyebrow before something rose to the forefront of my mind and I slapped my barely used chopsticks against the coffee table. You're goddamn right I do. Any of you interested in hearing about how Yoruchi here got into a water balloon fight with Halibel? The werecat's head shot up in clear interest as the blonde woman tilted her head. Yes. The goddess of Flash eagerly shouted. Great. So. And that's how Jin got Grimjow to blow up Las Noches in a prank war. I finished, to everyone's great amusement. Ishido was still as lost as a puppy, but he was laughing along with everybody else. Unohana and I had cleaned up everything at some point, and everyone had followed us into the kitchen to continue listening to my stories throughout. It was kinda adorable, as well as disorienting telling people about stories that my mind kept telling me they're aware of. Sadly, all the talking caused us to miss the sunrise, but it's not as if we'll always miss it. Your stories tell of a much happier time than you described the wars to be. Halibel questioned, one of her eyebrows raised. I blinked at the sudden question, thinking on it for a moment as I realized it had merit. Although I wanted the good mood everyone was in to stay, I knew things had to get serious sooner or later, so I sighed before responding. Aizen was a manipulative genius that had planned out the Winter War over 100 years in advance, but he was arrogant, and underestimated the capabilities of many people. Because he thought that no one would ever be able to stack up against him. Multiple times throughout the Winter War, we nearly won thanks to Aizen's overconfidence. So yeah, while the intensity of a war was still there, it was kinda dulled down because we were aware he was constantly thinking less of us. My eyes narrowed, and my tone steeled. But the BLD war was different. The enemy organized it for almost 1,000 years, they studied all potential enemies with scrutiny, they made technology to suppress our strength just in case we proved too much, made sure they constantly outnumbered us, and had countless backup plans in case shit went sideways for them despite them never believing that it would. Like Aizen, their leader was overconfident in his abilities, but he didn't underestimate us like Aizen had. If it so much as took longer than expected for us to lose, the leader would have his elite soldiers leave the battlefield under the assumption we were planning something. He had a list of people for his soldiers to look out for, people to either take extreme precaution against or avoid entirely. He would order specific soldiers to take on specific Shinigami, ones that would either have or make a clear advantage. He never broadcasted his abilities to us, he wouldn't take the chance that we could somehow plan around them. I felt a pulse from Shiro, and I realized I was shifting away from the original question. I shook my head to straighten my thoughts. In short, the Winter War sounded lax because it was, for the most part. But the BLD War was one of the worst throughout the entire history of the Soul Society. Everyone was staring at me, and a heavy atmosphere now hung over the room. I sighed again. Sorry for ruining the mood, I promise that won't be a regular thing. We have some stuff to do anyway, so are all of you ready? Give me a moment. Unohana announced as she stood, going to her room to get modest. You mentioned that one of the wars left everything destroyed. That was no exaggeration, was it? Halibel asked somberly. It wasn't. I confirmed. Everything is gone where I came from. I'm not letting that happen again. I can't match the amount of time the Quincy had to prepare, but I can make up for that with sheer information. I may not know how to counter everything they've got yet, but I do know what to counter. Can you best nearly 1,000 years of preparation with 3? Even with your vast knowledge, wouldn't such an endeavor be impossible? I hope it is. I answered, to everyone's apparent shock. Because I'm DMN good at doing the impossible. I caught the widening of Halibel and Stark's eyes, as well as the proud gleam that appeared in Yoruchi's. Unohana came out fully dressed a few moments later, and I knew more of her cleavage was shown on purpose. Alright, one more time, everybody ready? Everyone except the blonde Arankar nodded. You haven't specified what we are to be ready for. She pointed out. We're gonna introduce you to the captains. I explained. The soon-to-be queen raised an eyebrow. And how are we going to get to them without being attacked? I snorted. I forgot, you don't know me all that well yet. I don't do subtle. I opened the front door and walked out, waving for them to follow. Come on. We're gonna take a stroll through Main Street. Ashido, you stay in the 4th Division to recover. A lot of Shinigami glanced at me before shifting their gazes away, clearly afraid of me. I mentally noted what I was about to do was not going to fix that in the slightest. I sensed my group file out of Unohana's home and speed up to walk behind me. The hall was almost emptied out at the sight of the espada behind me, everyone clearly gathering what they were. Oh, Kami, the rumors were true. One random Shinigami screamed. I chuckled at that in unison with Shiro. They're running away. Lilynette announced. It's gonna take some time for them to stop being afraid of you guys. I soothed. Few, if any, of the Shinigami here have even seen an Arankar. Most are just going off stories and legends. Once they see Stark sleep everywhere and Halibel play chess with Yukatake or Kairaku, they'll start calming down. Grimjow is not gonna be allowed here until then. The lime-haired Arankar giggled. So we're just gonna walk over to the captains in broad daylight. Stark drawled. Yup. I confirmed. More specifically, we're going over to the head captain, where we'll arrange a captain's meeting. At least we don't have to run around everywhere. Going outside the 4th barely made a difference. At least until Rukia popped out of nowhere to kick me in the face. I blocked it with my hand, and was only startled out of any bad reaction by noticing she had attempted to kick me with her right leg that had not been removed in this timeline. The adopted Kuchiki in the meantime fell to the ground while clutching her foot. Stupid rock-strong strawberry, she cussed to herself. She was wearing a Shinigami uniform, but seeing as her Zanpakuto was not at her side, I understood that her powers were still coming back. Did you forget that I have Hiero? I asked, saving face by putting a smirk on my face. I still don't know what that is. I blinked. That was a good point. It's a defensive ability that hardens my skin, from my hollow side. Blood Vene strengthens the defensive properties of my veins, from my Quincy side. Thank you for telling me this after I kick you. Twice. She sarcastically shouted. You're welcome. Why did you kick me? Because you're a stupid strawberry that's walking around with Arankar in the middle of the Siriidii. So what, ya DMN midget? None of them are attacking, and we're going to Yamamoto to strike a deal. How is anyone supposed to know that beforehand, you oversized oaf? What if some of the Shinigami try to attack? Then I'll stop them. They're currently afraid of me, they'll cut the CRP if I tell them to. It doesn't solve the problem if you tell them after the fact. Is this the one you play fight with? Nell asked. Both Rukia and I turned to the Verdette. Yes. We shouted in unison before returning to our argument. That argument lasted until we reached Yamamoto's office, and Rukia only realized where we were when I knocked. She immediately shut up upon locating the double doors with a giant one emblazoned on. Enter. Well, Yamamoto already sounded annoyed. I opened the doors and walked in with my group following behind, Rukia much meeker than she had been seconds ago. I could hear you two arguing the moment you entered the first division. The aged captain growled. That wasn't arguing. I corrected. We were playing. On to more important matters, I'm gonna need you to call a captain's meeting. For what reason? I jabbed a thumb at the espada behind me. To introduce everyone. The head captain stared at them for a moment before holding his forehead in his right palm and sighing heavily. Sasakaibe. He ordered, and the lieutenant sent out a dozen hell butterflies. The bearded captain grabbed his cane and stood before coming toward us. How did I deal with you last time? I heard Yamamoto sigh. Last time I wasn't anywhere near as powerful, useful, or brazen until really late into the Second War. It was easy for you to order around a teenager that you could knock out with a flick. An adult that's stronger than you, knows it, and is overall extremely useful to you is significantly harder to deal with, I imagine. His eye twitched. Wonderful. He grumbled. I smirked, and glanced back to CA. That by being a MSTR tactician. We are still not done planning, but we have a good idea and a solid start. In this meeting, we are going to set that plan in motion. So if you want to win this upcoming war, listen up, because this is step 1. You're asking us to follow a plan not fully formed. Yamamoto raised an eyebrow. We don't exactly have the luxury of time, here. I've got the beginning down, anyway. I reasoned. Then proceed. I nodded and began pacing a small circle in the middle of the room, looking everyone in the eye as I passed them. Alright, so the enemy we're preparing for are the Quincy. They are led by a Quincy named Yhwach. Yamamoto fought them 1,000 years ago, and failed to kill him. This should be your first hint that they are a serious threat. Over the past 1,000 years, they have been watching the Soul Society in Hueco Mundo, studying our abilities and technology. Quite literally, they are watching us from the shadows. Before any of you start going off about how I'm letting loose my knowledge of them where they can potentially hear it, they only watch select areas. Any and all known training grounds, places with the most foot traffic, and the academy are all kept under almost constant watch. They don't care about our personal lives, they just want to study our combat abilities. I will inform all of you of places to train without fear of being watched, but make sure to not make it obvious what's going on. If they get suspicious that we're aware of them, they will watch us more. They'll watch our homes, they'll have soldiers tail us, they will find out what we are doing and they will make it their goal to learn how they got found out. These guys are ruthless, and paranoid. Shiro warned. They catch wind that King is from the Futri, we're fed. We never found out all their plans, we're planning around what they did to us, and if they SWCH it up, we're running in blind again. They got enough of an advantage as is, we can't afford any more. Yhwach has hundreds of thousands of foot soldiers, and each of them are trained to match lieutenants. He has 26 elite soldiers, 4 of which make up his personal guard. This was done on purpose to perfectly outnumber our captains, and each of those elites are stronger than most of you are now. Step 1 is bridging that gap. Zangetsu and I have begun formulating training regimens tailored specifically to each of you, to at the very least get you to where you were in my time, and hopefully past that. The Quincy dominated for most of the war because they took full control almost immediately. Whenever we managed to overcome a disadvantage, they switched tactics, switched soldiers, and changed targeting zones. We were constantly trying to figure them out, while they knew everything about us the entire time. We are working to turn that advantage of knowledge around on them, and shift things so that when they attack, we are the ones in full control. I will give everyone knowledge about the enemy, and as the plan comes closer to being fully formed, I will assist each of you in preparing to face specific soldiers. Zangetsu and I will also be going around the Siriidii, personally assisting significant fighters in their training. This will include helping some of you unlock Bankai, helping others learn to utilize their Zanpakuto better, helping MSTR certain abilities, and help some of you unlock new forms. Arankar, I'm sure you caught me saying, Segunda Etapa, when I recruited you. This is a second stage of resurrection. Okiura has access to a bastardized form of it. I will be helping him unlock the true version of it, as well as helping all of you access yours. I will eventually go to the world of the living to recruit Kisuke Urahara and the exiled Shinigami from 100 years ago. They will partake in training just like you, they will be your allies like the Arankar, and you can beach and MMM all you want if you don't like it. We don't have the time to be picky about our allies, neither I nor the Quincy give a shit about how confident you are in your abilities, and if I catch you making a big deal out of it when we're preparing for a war that in my time killed all of you, I'll intensify your training to the point where you won't be able to speak. Understood? Although everyone nodded, Soifan distinctly looked uncomfortable, having clearly understood I was directing all of that on her. King, old man, and I, gonna be assigning ourselves as your trainers. We be there the whole time, we got our own sheet ta do and other people ta train, we're just gonna be getting ya started. We will occasionally pop in ta see how it's going and we might drop a pointer or two if you need it. This is gonna be hell, but we're trying ta make up fair 1,000 years prep time, so deal with it. I nodded at his words. We'll get to everyone, and for those we can't get to immediately, get your butt in gear because we're gonna be your SLV drivers. Like I said, we don't have everyone figured out, but for those we have already planned out, I will take Yamamoto, Renji, Rukia, Yoruchi, Zaraki, Soifan, Halibel, and Stark. I'm Takin, Momo and Nell. We've each got others, but they ain't here right now. And I shall oversee Toshiro and Byakuya. For those of us aware of everyone you're familiar with, who's taking who? Yoruchi called out. Shiro and I will both oversee the Visored, and I'm also taking Kisuke. I'm showing Chad how to use his sheet properly, helping out Okiura, and teaching Grimjow how to earn a crown. I shall also direct Yuryu in how to properly use Quincy techniques. If anyone has a problem with that, I don't give a shit. You may not understand it, but everyone's arranged that way for a reason. You have left out a lot of names in your training regimens. Kuratsuchi pointed out. Some people I either can't help out, or will serve a different purpose. You, for example, will work with Kisuke to counter their tech. The Quincy have devices to travel through shadows, and medallions to steal our Bankais once released. The clown's eyes widened in interest. Jin, you were dead during the BLD war, so I don't know how to help you. Unohana, I already returned to the fight. Kamamura, you said something about performing some ritual and you turned, mostly human. The wolfman narrowed his eyes, he seemed to recognize what I was talking about. Kairaku, Yukatake, you're pretty much ready. I want you to spar with Unohana regularly to double-check that you're not rusty, and if you are, to get back up to par. They require no assistance yet I do. Yamamoto questioned. You've been sitting down and doing nothing for so long that you've gotten rusty. I grunted. Yhwach said as much before he cut you in half. Shouts of shock erupted across the room, but the bearded captain merely gripped his cane. You need a warm-up. Not some half-butted one like sparring with Kairaku and Yukatake, but a full-on fight where you're trying to kill someone. For your training, we're going to go to Mukin, let loose our Bankais and you're gonna try not to die until you can keep up with me. The ancient captain cracked his eyes open, and I could feel how badly Soifan wanted to deny what I was saying. I can't help but feel uncomfortable with who your hollow is assigned to. Toshiro announced. I raised an eyebrow. I'm gonna assume you're not talking about the 3 Arankar or single human he's watching over and instead about Momo. I drawled. The icy captain flinched minutely. Shiro. As weird as it might sound, which and white-faced. Rukia, who looked like I just slapped death across the face. Why you just, ordered the head captain. Yup. An said, you were stronger than him. Yup. Are, you trying to get killed? I sighed as my smirk dropped. Since you keep forgetting, I'm not the Ichigo that thought he could take on Byakuya because he unlocked Shirkai. I'm the Ichigo that beat the guy that killed the Soul King. My best friend's eyes widened. Don't let that confuse you, though. I'm still the Ichigo that would invade a world full of people stronger than me to rescue my friend. I'm still the Ichigo that will never let you live down being unable to open a juice box. My smile returned, and I followed after Yamamoto. And I'm still the Ichigo that will forever be grateful for you coming into my life. Unohana and Yoruchi were at my sides instantly. You know, I'm starting to think Rukia was part of your first time. The Warcat teased. Unohana giggled behind her hand as I barked out a laugh. Nah, Rukia's one of my best friends. Besides, she's got Rinji. Furthermore, you can stop asking him, Yoruchi-chan. My nurse pacified. Oh. Why not? Well, let's just say I solved the puzzle. An excited glint appeared in the goddess of Flash's eyes as a lump of dread formed in my throat. It was going to be hell dealing with one. Please, Kami, don't have them both teasing me with all they had at the same time. Who is it? Tell me. Please. Unohana pressed herself up to my side and Yoruchi mirrored her, clearly expecting an answer from the medic. Oh my, I never said you could stop guessing, but I can narrow it down for you if you wish. The purple-haired goddess's eyes were practically shining, and I gulped as I realized no one behind me could tell what was going on and Yamamoto in front of me wasn't paying attention to us at all. Oh, a hint. I nearly choked as Unohana palmed my crotch without any warning. Shiro, the demon he was, kept my Ryatsu level so no one could get suspicious. Betrayal filled my veins as Asen took control of my body to keep me walking smoothly. I'm one of his two partners. The first Kenpachi purred. Yoruchi extruded a gleeful aura, and a mischievous chuckle bubbled out of her throat. Oh ho ho ho, now this is interesting. Kami, why have you forsaken me? Is it because I time traveled? I'm not sorry, but this is too cruel a punishment. The raven-haired medic leaned up to whisper in my ear. It feels so much better than it looks, by the way. Were it not for Asen being in control of my body, my head would be smoking and Unohana would be enjoying herself far more. To my great relief, the two women separated from my sides. To my great horror, they huddled together to whisper with each other. I can get Shiro, but you too, old man. You made the decision to wait on your own. Unohana and Yoruchi cared for you more than anyone else throughout the wars, and made you happier than even mother. I have been abandoned by my Zanpakuto. I have betrayed myself. Yep. Indeed. I shoved myself back in control and folded my arms over my chest as I pouted. What's with the pout? Rukia asked, having joined my side at some point. My Zanpakuto just abandoned me. They don't agree with some of my decisions. Ah. I can sympathize. Oh, shut up, DMN midget. A smug smirk grew on her face. Make me, strawberry. Oh, IFNG will. Come over here. She stuck her tongue out as she retreated out of my reach. I followed her, and we ran circles around the group as we shouted automated insults at each other. Before Yamamoto could get irritated enough to try to burn me, I snapped forward to catch the midget by the back of her shihakusho. We were in front of the doors to the meeting hall, and everyone was present except Saraki, including Jin. I blinked and dropped Rukia on her but, hearing her immediate complaints as I walked over to the snake. He noticed almost immediately, and directed his smile at me. Hiya. Hey. Before you say anything, I want to apologize. The man tilted his head in confusion. I took your opportunity from you. Didn't give you the chance to give Aizen what he deserves. Guess you really are from the future, Ainsha. Outside of the fact that I had my own axe to grind with Aizen, I took it from you because when you tried, you failed. You got Aizen in the heart with your Bankai, set off the poison, and watched a hole appear in his chest. The problem is that he regenerated, and killed you for it. The snake's grin fell, and he opened his eyes. You're saying, what I did was for nothing. No. I'm saying he had a magic bullshit rock, and you don't have to deal with that anymore. You didn't betray the Soul Society in this timeline. Ranjaku doesn't hate you anymore. So after this meeting, if you really want to fulfill your promise to her, take her out on a date. The man stared at me for a long moment, his eyes open the whole time. Then he closed them, and gave me a genuine smile. I see, then. Thanks. I returned his smile before going back to my group. What did you two talk about? Yoruchi asked. For his own reasons, Jin probably wanted Aizen dead more than even the Vizard did. I apologized to him for not giving him the opportunity to kill the man himself. The werecat's eyebrows rose in shock and disbelief. Okay. Zaraki slid into the hall, Yachiru giggling on his shoulder. Oi, Yachiru. The current Kenpachi growled to his Zanpakuto spirit. You said we would be here 10 minutes ago. Then I thought I smelled some candy, and so I had you go to the candy, but there wasn't candy. Don't lie to me. We passed the Squad 11 barracks 3 times. But I did smell candy, Kenny. Every time we came to where I thought the candy was, it turned out to be somewhere else. How's that work out? Don't ask me, Kenny. I don't know. Fine. We're here now, we'll worry about the disappearing candy later. But I want candy now. Then go to Yukatake. He always gives you candy, doesn't he? Thanks, Kenny. The pink-haired spirit shouted as she bounced over to her second favorite captain, who already had a small bag of treats in his hand. The meeting doors opened after the girl returned to her wielder, and everyone entered. The errand car stayed behind me as Yoruchi leapt over to Byakuya. Everyone is here. Begin, Kurosaki. Yamamoto gruffly ordered. I withheld my smirk, gesturing to the group behind me. Alright, getting this out of the way, these are some of the errand car I recruited from Hueco Mundo. There's a few more, but they wished to stay. They are going to be our allies, and will report directly to me until they are treated as equals. Kuratsuchi, I will tell you once and once only, touch a hair on any of their heads without XPLCT permission and I will personally destroy your lab, everything in it, and all of your backups. The clown snarled, but nodded. Alright, you can introduce yourselves. As expected, Halibel came up first. I am Tyr Halibel, the third Espada. The name's Coyote Stark. First Espada. This is Lilinette, she's my fraction. Hi. I'm Neliel Tuo Delschvank, the former third Espada. Nice to meet you all. The captains each introduced themselves, and I continued. Okay, I understand that was a little rushed, but now we're moving on to the important stuff. I stepped forward a little, and Zangetsu manifested behind me. I sensed the errand car take a step back to give us more room. Since coming here, my Zanpakuto and I have spent every minute we had planning. I personally am not the best at it, but Asen here makes up for. Friends. Where we come from. We ain't as close as you two, but whenever I ain't with King and his friends, I'm with her. You're someone she's trained to kill on sight. Moreover, you're the hollow of the dot man, that killed the person she worshipped. The prodigy reasoned. Shiro glanced at me out the corners of his eyes, and I nodded. Yeah, and I wouldn't mind for a second if she decided she needed a punch-in bag. Being betrayed by the person what makes up your world is something I'm familiar with. Contrary to what you might think, King and I didn't always have a perf-CT relationship. Shiro, we don't have a perfect relationship. Yeah, 'cause you'll stop yourself from fucking the brains out of someone 'cause you're fucking waiting, and I'm questioning your life decisions. Luckily, everyone's attention was on us, so no one other than me noticed the smirk appear on Anohana's face. Ignore that last bit. I demanded to everyone. To Shiro, you still think Shiro training Momo is a bad decision? Although the captain's eye twitched at his name, he shook his head. I apologize. I underestimated how much thought you put into all of this. It's fine. I waved off. Anyone else want my reasoning explained to them? Yes, Soifan immediately spoke up. Why are you training me? Because deal with it. I shot back automatically. That's not in dash. Anyone else? I cut her off. Why is Shiro training Sato-kun? Rukia cautiously asked. I'm not gonna explain the intricacies of it, but Chad's and Oriheim's powers have hollow origins. Shiro is the best one for that. Oriheim isn't being trained because she already has all of her powers unlocked, but Chad is holding himself back. Shiro also happens to be the expert on that particular type of restraint. Is that all? Everyone shook their heads. Alright then, so I'm sure at least most of you think you know what Quincy's can do though Yuryu. The group that we're preparing for, the Wandenreach, are on a completely different level, and have a much more dangerous bag of tricks. All of them specialize in long-range combat, but most also have close-range weaponry. Yhwach made sure to train all of his elites to get their close-range combat up to par with ours, so don't assume that you have the advantage if you keep them where you want them. The foot soldiers are also trained in close combat, but they were just trained enough to last long enough to get away. You get in their breathing room, and they will lose. The foot soldiers wield rapier bows and swords, and each carry tubes of liquefied rapier that power their traps. If their behavior is suspicious in combat, watch them carefully, as they likely are preparing a trap. The main purpose of the foot soldiers is to take out those lieutenant class and below so the elite soldiers can focus on the captains and other significant threats. The elite soldiers are called Sternritter. In addition to the standard weaponry that they share with the foot soldiers, they each have weapons that are tailored specifically for them. Whether those weapons are to channel their powers or enhance them depend on the Sternritter and their power. The power I'm talking about is called a script. Upon drinking some of Yhwach's BLD, they are granted a letter by him that describes their ability. Some of those abilities are negligible, some start off weak but build up in strength quickly, some are difficult to deal with, and some you will require strategy and allies to combat. Yhwach himself is the, or Almighty. Listen to what I'm about to say well, because this, more than anything else, determines if we win or lose. Everyone grew tense, to the point that even Zaraki seemed worried. Do not, under any circumstances, give him a reason to activate the Almighty. What does it do, for you to give us such a warning? Byakuya asked, clearly perturbed. The Almighty allows Yhwach to not only see every possible future, but control which future occurs. The first time I fought him, he broke my Bankai the moment I released it using that ability. Multiple times in our final battle, I killed him, only for him to pull from alternate futures where he didn't die and resurrect himself. He will see every move you make throughout the entirety of a battle before you even enter the battlefield, he will see every opening in every attack you send out before you even draw your sword, and he will know what decisions you will make before you even come across the choice. Worst of all, he will use this ability to completely overwhelm us and erase any chances of victory. According to Asen, the only reason I managed to beat him was because the attack I sent out was so destructive, there were no futures in which Yhwach could have survived. The room was left stunned. So long as you follow our instructions and never give Yhwach reason to use the Almighty, you will not have to worry about such power. Focus, for we are not finished in informing you all of the upcoming threat. Most of the people in the meeting snapped out of their shock. I'll probably have to go through some of these profiles again anyway. The 4 elite guard are the C, D, M, and X Sternritter. The script given to them are compulsory, death-dealing, miracle, and X-axis, respectively. The compulsory has the ability to control his nerves, as well as spread them across the battlefield to infect his enemies' nerves and control those. He also can replicate most of the traits of those he comes into contact with, being Ryatsu level, intelligence, and physical abilities. The death-dealing can adjust the immunity levels of both himself and his enemies. If he is exposed to your Ryatsu, given enough time, he can become immune to it. If he drinks your BLD, he can lower your body's immunity to your own BLD so that you are poisoned by your BLD. Anything that can be measured in amounts he can F with if he's exposed to it. The miracle is just plain annoying. The more impossible it would be for something to happen, the more likely it's going to happen. For example, if he tried to fight all of the Godai at once, it would be impossible for him to survive and win, so he would become powerful enough to beat the entire Godai. The trick is that his actual physical body is functionally immortal. He's pretty similar to a mod soul in that you have to destroy his core to kill him. I did that by accident by vaporizing him with my Bankai. For the X-axis, he's got a giant gun. When he shoots, he pierces everything between himself and his target, and it's extremely specific, so if you dodge while he shoots, you're fine. He's got a sheetload of weird and complicated abilities that I don't understand, just take him out quick and you're fine. Next is the second in command. His letter is B, obviously, and it stands for balance. It's a cheap but ability where if his opponent is fortunate enough to hit him, and he's unfortunate enough to get hit, he balances the fortune by shoving his injuries to you. Basic LLY, he's a beach. Who's next? Shiro asked me. I smirked. Shiro smirked back at me. Bumbo asterisk. I like Bumbo. If only she was on our side. The Zanpakuto faced our audience once again. Bumbo's ability is explode, and it's a bit special. She controls Erasure, and anything that her controlled Erasure comes into contact with becomes a bomb. The F is the fear. He fires thorns of Erasure, and if they come into contact with you, you are forced to become terrified of him. You can easily overcome his ability by simply having great willpower. Next is the glutton. She can extend her mouth from her body, and while doing this, she can eat through anything and everything without resistance. This includes Ryatsu, barriers, your Zanpakuto, and more. Then is the heat, who can fire beams of intense fire from his fingers. It can match Ryujin Jaka's flames, be wary of it. Following him is the iron. He can use Erasure to form an iron-like substance along his skin, Zaraki's Shirkai easily ignores it. Coming up is jail. He can make prisons that completely seal you off from the rest of the world. Only way to get out is to feed a Quincy Ryatsu, no amount of force will so much as scratch it. Then there's the robot. He's the knight, and he can make weapons from his body. The L. It was obvious how angered Asen was by the Sternritter in question. He had inherited my disgust for those that play with others' emotions. Is the love. He can fire a projectile of Erasure that induces a feeling of false obsession of him in the victim. Once hit, they will do anything he commands without question. Only those who do not feel love are immune to it. The necrosis, I continued for my Quincy spirit, can prevent injuries caused by him from healing, as well as causes them to become worse over time. The effect ends with his death. Next is the overkill. He absorbs the power of those he kills, which sounds really bad, but he's stupid, arrogant, and likes feeling like he's superior. He goes for nameless Shinigami mostly while complaining about how weak they are and denying that he likes it, so if you see him, just take him out. The P is power. She's got some serious physical strength, but ain't got much else. Question makes you doubt yourself to the point that you can't fight. That sounds worrisome. Yukitake frowned. In theory. I grunted. She went to Zaraki for the purpose of questioning him out of the fight. Neither she nor Yhwach realized that when Zaraki gets confused, he just attacks whatever confused him. The captain in question snorted. You got that right. Moving on, the R is the roar. He has a supersonic screech. There is little threat to be had so long as you have proper ear protection. The S is the superstar. Although it appears to be a single person, the superstar is two people completely unified by the ability. Through cheering the other on, they empower themselves, heal themselves, and even bring the other back from the dead through the ability. The only way to defeat them is to eliminate both at the same time. The Thunderbolt is able to attack with lightning, simple enough. The underbelly can analyze Ryatsu and find out people's weaknesses by doing so. He prefers to hide out in a corner and watch people like a stalker because his ability becomes more effective the longer he watches someone. Next is the Visionary. He's a kid, but don't underestimate him. His power is to make anything he thinks up real. Makin' your bones into puddin', makin' meteors appear out of nowhere, shit like that's easy for him. All you gotta do is not let him thinkin' you got an easy shot at winning. The W is the wind. For the most part, the name is inaccurate to the ability. He bends things away from objects and people that he wishes, such as bending swords away from his body before they can cut him, or splitting things by having it bend away from itself. The only limitation is his perception. If he cannot perceive an attack coming, he cannot bend it away from himself. The yourself is made up of two people. Unlike the superstar, they are not united together. They are two people with two versions of the same ability. One mimics someone's appearance and memory, while the other mimics someone's appearance and power. Neither can do both, and that's an easy way to figure out if the person you're talking to is real or not. Finally, is the zombie. A pit of disgust formed in my stomach, and I felt Zangetsu have a similar reaction. Her BLD infects anyone that's not a Quincy upon contact, and turns them into a zombie for her to control. If they are a Quincy, she can only turn them once they're dead. She can do this as many times as she likes without limit, and there is no way to resist her control. Kuratsuchi eventually found a way to keep our allies from being controlled by her, but he couldn't find a way to prevent her from reviving other Quincy. Most of the BLD war, she would bring back Sternritter that died, resurrect them, and Yhwach would strengthen them before sending them out to fight again. When we finally managed to get a leg up on the Wandenrake, it was halfway through the 5th year of the war, and it was when I finally managed to end her. She hangs around the other female Sternritter. She's utterly disgusting and has no regard for the lives of those around her. If you see her, killing her becomes your priority, regardless of what you were doing until then. You could be delivering us their backup plans, sneaking around to assassinate Yhwach, hell even transporting an injured ally to a medic. Killing the zombie will take priority. I sense something more than military tactics behind your words. Yamamoto gravely prodded. She took control of multiple of my friends and ordered them to attack me while she sat back and watched. Kuratsuchi hadn't invented the way to turn them back at the time. Through the heavy aura that had manifested at the start of the warning/information dump, I felt the sympathy that nearly everyone felt for me. Am I forgetting anything? I asked Zangetsu. Both shook their heads. Nothing I can currently recall, outside of going over their tactics and methodology. That can be saved for another time. Alright, Halibel, you take Stark, Lilinet, and Nell with you back to Hueco Mundo. Shiro and I will pop in sometime soon for your training. The blonde nodded before opening a Garganta and having her fellow Arrancar enter before her. I turned to the Shinigami around me. Like I said at that start, our plan isn't fully formed, but the part of the plan that's requiring the most work is the final step, which is the opening assault. However prepared we manage to become, what we do during the assault determines whether it will be worth it or not. And we have already caught so many ways where things can go horribly wrong. These next 3 years will not be easy on anyone, but if we do this right, it will all be worth it. Yamamoto, I will be waiting in front of your office tomorrow after sunrise. Be ready. I finished before turning away. I'm sure the bearded captain would have tried to burn me for my leaving without his dismissal had he not been contemplating my words. Zangetsu returned to my inner world as I opened the massive double doors. I was halfway towards the exit of the first division when Yoruchi, Unohana, and oddly enough, Shuhei caught up to me. Shuhei? I questioned. You need something from me? The man chucked nervously. Well, kind of. This is gonna be really awkward to ask, and maybe a little insensitive, but please understand I don't mean to offend you if I do, he ranted with an uneasy smile. See, I'm part of the Seriidii Bulletin, I'm actually the chief editor, which you probably know, I just realized. I have a lot of duties and responsibilities and dash. Just spit it out. I promise I won't be offended, as you probably realized, I know you. I commanded. Okay, then, would you mind if I asked you to tell the events of the time you're from for the Seriidii Bulletin? That threw me for a loop. I blinked. You, want me turn the wars into bathroom reading material? Ah, that's making it sound really bad. Since you're from the future and all, and you know all of us more than we might ever know you, and since half the Seriidii is terrified of you, I thought it would be good if there was a way for them to connect with you, you know. Get past the fact that you can go toe-to-toe with the head captain in his bankai and find out who you really are. And you also want us to train for the upcoming war with the Quincy's, so I thought, what if there was a way to do both at the same time? And I came up with the idea of you having the Seriidii Bulletin publish your experiences in the war, so Shinigami can both get to know you and get tips about how to get stronger, or learn the enemy's battle strategies. Wonderful idea, Hisagi-san. Unohana praised. The tattooed man turned to the raven-haired medic in shock. Really? I thought I was kinda stupid, and insensitive to the experiences Kurosaki-san went through. Oh, quite the contrary. It would do well in assisting the Seriidii in growing comfortable with Ichigo, and help them understand the weight of what he has done. My eye twitched as I watched my nurse attempt to make my decision for me. Hold on, what if I don't want to do it? What if I don't want to burden the Shinigami with the thoughts of what happens if this goes wrong? She sighed before pouting. Then I would have to allow it, as I cannot force you to do something you do not want to do. Shuhei seemed to grow even more nervous at our interaction. He quickly pulled out something from his shihakusho before moving it out towards me. I couldn't help but grab out of reflex. If you don't want to do it, or are on the fence about it, at least take this in case you do decide to do it. I glanced down at the black device in my hands. Why did you give me a camcorder? The bulletin recently thought to take a new approach to publishing. Videos are much more efficient than magazines, especially to Shinigami. They have something to visually STMLT them while listening to articles, and since they don't have to actually look at it to receive information, Shinigami can listen while filling out paperwork or going on patrols. Alright. I'll give it back within a week, I guess. Probably not gonna do it, though. Knowing that you at least gave it some thought is all I need. Thanks, then, Shuhei. See ya. I waved before turning back to exit the building. Goodbye, Kurosaki-san. The tattooed man responded before I heard him leave in another direction. So, are you really not gonna do it? Yoruchi immediately asked. Because it's something I would definitely spend money for. You can ask me about what happened whenever you want. 9 times out of 10, I'd tell you. It's different, though, having my personal experiences available to the public for them to listen whenever they want. Especially these experiences. I wasn't just talking out of my butt when I mentioned how Shinigami might worry themselves into depression. It might also invigorate them like it did you. The want to keep what you love safe is a powerful motivator, and knowing it could all be destroyed if they don't grow stronger could be all they need to grow stronger. The first Kenpachi suggested. It's a risk. I frowned. I'm not sure if I want to take risks in a situation like this. If it goes wrong, I'm not sure I'll be able to fix it in time for us to be ready. Kurosaki-san. The voice of Nanao cut off our conversation. The three of us turned back to see the prim and proper lieutenant jogging up to us with Ranjaku at her side. What's up? And please don't say it's about recording a video. The women blinked before shaking their heads in unison. I immediately grew suspicious, as those two being so in sync usually meant bad things. Can you take off your top for us? The strawberry blonde asked. Her glasses-wearing partner blushed heavily, but nodded tightly. I blinked. What? We are looking for candidates for this year's calendar. It's mostly bought by the women of the Soul Society, so we've decided to tailor it more to them this year to boost sales. The raven-haired lieutenant explained. That doesn't explain why you want me to take off my shirt. Nanao blushed harder. Well dash. The calendar is gonna be full of guys, half naked at best, and we're trying to find the best looking guys for it. Ranjaku grinned. Hell dash. Yoruchi cut my rejection off by pulling down the shoulders of my shihakusho, causing the garment to fall and bunch around my waist. God damn it, Yoruchi. The workcat stuck her tongue out with the smuggest look she could manage, and I was half tempted to lean forward and grab her tongue with my teeth. We found a winner. The blonde cheered. Indeed. Kurosaki-san, would you mind posing for our calendar? No way in hell. Ichigo currently has no source of income. Unohana supplied. I turned to her with a horrified look. We'll give you 10% of the revenue. Ranjaku immediately offered. 5, Nanao lowered. 7. Fine. We'll give you 7% of the revenue if you agree to be in the calendar. I glared at all four women. Can you guarantee that I won't be naked? I asked. Yes. The strawberry blonde agreed. I continued glaring for a moment. Crank it back up to 10% and you have a deal. 8. The lieutenant of the 8th Division immediately counteroffered. 10. 9. 10, I growled. 10 it is. The proper woman squeaked. We will contact you when we are taking the pictures. Have a nice day. Having said her piece, Nanao grabbed Ranjaku by the arm and pulled her away. I sighed and slipped my top back on, ignoring Yoruchi's whine of complaint. I readjusted my clothes so that everything fit comfortably, and then crossed my arms over my chest. Is something wrong? Unohana asked. I'm waiting for the third surprise visitor. They never come in twos. Well, Hisagi-san went up to us for the bulletin, and the girls came for the SWA. I can't think of any other organizations in the dash. The workcat was cut off by another voice. Excuse me, Kurosaki-san. The goddess of Flash's mouth fell open in shock. Told you. I sighed before turning to hopefully the last person to interrupt us. My face dropped into a scowl at the man in obnoxiously expensive-looking clothing that was coming our way. You are Kurosaki-san, correct? I apologize for my confusion, you don't completely fit the description I was given. The noble announced. Yeah. I grunted. I was only humoring him because I didn't see any bribes on his person. Perfect. The man smiled. The Tsunyashiros are inviting you to have dinner with them tonight, they are most excited to meet you. I vaguely recalled Kairaku telling me of a noble house with that name a few years back. I didn't remember what he told me about them. Why are they inviting me to dinner? I asked, curious. The Tsunyashiros are one of the 4 great noble clans. Yoruchi informed. They document the history of the Soul Society, and are probably really interested in the fact that you time-traveled. Wait, So you mean they don't want to bribe me into being their personal attack dog? Most likely. The purple-haired woman shrugged. When's the dinner? I immediately asked the noble. 7 p.m. tonight, Kurosaki-san. Great. I'll be there with Unohana and Yoruchi. The man quickly grew nervous. Why you see, Kurosaki-san, they requested that you only bring a maximum of one guest with you. You see, I don't care. Go on, you better let them know I'm gonna bring 2 guests so they don't freak out. I shooed the man away, and he left promptly. You know, it's pretty ballsy to just ignore a noble's request like that. Yoruchi smirked. It was pretty ballsy to invade the Soul Society and stop an execution, too, and I kicked the butt of a noble clan head while at it. I snarked. Both women giggled at my comment. Come on, we need to pick up our clothes from the cleaners and get some formal wear for me. This should be impossible. And that is coming from someone that regularly does the impossible. I mumbled once again as we stood in front of the Tsuneyashiro home. Yes, you've been repeating that since leaving the store. Unohana sighed. Because it should be impossible. I reasoned. What I was referring to were the clothes that they had picked out for me. Which were a near-perfect replica of my Bankai coat from my regained powers after I lost them fighting Aizen, minus the neck guard and the gloves. And the fact that they had demanded I wear it upon it catching their eye. They refused any and all outfits I picked out, which were infinitely more formal than something I linked to battle attire. Their reasoning was that if I broke the mold for everything else, I might as well break the mold for this. After nearly half an hour of arguing and fruitlessly picking different outfits, Unohana won by whispering something in my ear so dirty that Asen had to manifest to hold me back from taking her then and there. The medic was currently clad in a mind-numbingly appealing ankle-length kimono that looked like someone had ripped a sunset out of the sky and plastered it onto the fabric. The bottom was strikingly black, and slowly melted into a myriad of oranges, yellows, reds, and purples as it went up. Her hair was pinned up at the back of her head in a series of loops, and it only strengthened the elegant aura she radiated. Yoruchi was the opposite in the best possible way. She wore a short kimono which ended at her mid-thigh that displayed her legs gloriously. It was black, with orange splattered about like someone threw paint on it, and everything about it screamed defiance. Especially with her hair completely undone and tossed over her right shoulder. I noticed that both women wore orange and black, colors that almost seemed synonymous with me. Unohana most likely did it intentionally, and Yoruchi probably still hasn't realized. The door we were waiting in front of opened, and I refocused my attention on who opened it. It was a tall man who looked to be just under 6 feet tall, with dark green hair kept in a bun, and clad in a green kimono that looked outrageously expensive. He had brown eyes, and a wide smile appeared on his face as soon as he spotted me. Kurosaki-san. I'm so happy you accepted my invitation. Please, come in. The man stepped to the side so we could enter, and shut the door behind us. The dining room is this way, please follow me. As we were shown the way to the dining room, I noticed the displays lining the walls, either of items preserved in glass boxes or papers hung in frames with plaques in front of each. I see you noticed our relics. Pride filled the man's voice. I raised an eyebrow. Relics? Throughout the history of the Soul Society, there have been many objects of great importance or significance. We have collected them in our mission to keep record of the history of the Soul Society, and preserve them as best as we can. Neat. We were led to a large room with an equally large table, a large and heavenly buffet atop it. A woman slightly shorter than Yoruchi was waiting for us, with light green hair of a slightly different shade than Lilinette's. The woman wore a similar kimono to the man that had brought us to the room, the only difference being she also wore a green obi. She had green eyes and a small smile that for some reason made me feel like I should raise my guard. I made a mental note to watch her as the man stepped up to the woman and put his arm around her as they faced us. Now that everyone is here, allow us to introduce ourselves. I am Donyoku Tsuneyashiro, 17th head of the Tsuneyashiro clan. This is my wife, Kyo Ikakoro Tsuneyashiro. The man greeted. It is wonderful to meet you. Kyo Ikakoro beamed. Ichigo Kurosaki. I responded. No need to be rude, even if they already knew my name. Retsu Unohana, captain of the 4th division. My nurse bowed. Yoruchi Shihoin, ex-captain of the 2nd division and 22nd head of the Shihoin clan. The workcat nodded. It is truly a pleasure to meet all of you, you all are so significant in the history of the Soul Society. Please, let us sit down and eat. Donyoku ushered. We sat so that Unohana was to my left, and Yoruchi to my right with the Tsuneyashiros across from us. The green-haired man sat to the left of his wife. The food was great, and I begrudgingly sent thanks to my dad for teaching me manners. Ahem, since I'm sure you're wondering why I invited you, I must admit that I am utterly fascinated by the rumors that you are from the future. Are they true? The man excitedly asked. Yeah. One of my friends made a rock to send me back in time, and I flung myself back 10 years. Incredible. And who was it that made the rock? Kisuke Urahara. The green couple gasped. Kurosaki-san, you don't mean the man that was exiled from the Soul Society due to hollowifying his fellow Shinigami? The woman looked appalled. I shook my head. Kisuke didn't do that. That was Aizen, and when Kisuke figured it out, Aizen framed him for it. Actually, Kisuke helped them out as best as he could. He couldn't destroy their hollows, because they were already part of their souls, but he did help them with learning to keep them under control and use them. Yoruchi nodded in confirmation and the man's eyes gleamed. Oh, my. I knew you would be able to shine light on some events that were difficult to document, but I didn't know you would be this helpful. A chuckle popped out of my throat. Happy to help. From what I've heard, Aizen seemed to be masterminding his betrayal for a long time. It's unbelievable that the signs were so well hidden. Aizen may have believed himself to be untouchable, but he could back up his words, for the most part. Yes, like that. There weren't even hints of him having a god complex. Oh, there were, he just knew how to make sure everyone always looked at something else. As a historian, I must ask that you assist me in clearing up the parts of documented history that were muddled by Aizen. I tossed the thought over in my head with Zangetsu's input. When I've got the time, sure. I'm gonna be busy these next 3 years, so don't expect me all that often. You sparing any time to help is already more than enough, Kurosaki-san. Kyo Ikakoro dismissed. Quite. And if it's not too much to ask, I humbly request that you also assist me in documenting the alternative history you came from. Donyoku pleaded. Asen voiced his opinion in my head, with Shiro's agreement. Maybe. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but we need to wipe Aizen's influence out of the Soul Society's history first. I answered. Of course. The green-haired man nodded. The rest of the dinner was mostly spent with Donyoku grilling me about events that were vague or wrong through Aizen's manipulation, with the occasional comment from his wife. Shiro brought it to my attention that she only spoke to me, which ticked another box in my head. After finishing dessert, we made to leave. You are welcome whenever, Ichigo-san. The head of the Tsuneyashiro clan announced. I had managed to get it through their heads that I prefer to forego formalities, but Donyoku still attached "san" despite referring to me by my first name. Indeed, come as often as you'd like, Ichigo. On the contrary, his wife had seemed all too eager to comply with my request, which I wouldn't have been suspicious about had she not already ticked an uncomfortable amount of boxes in my head. It was only through my experience deciphering the tells of people like Aizen, Yhwach, Kisuke and Kairaku that I picked up so many things, and that in of itself ticked a box. Unohana, Yoruchi and I each made our goodbyes before leaving the estate, and a scowl fell upon my face as soon as I was sure that Tsunoyashiro's couldn't see it. Is something wrong, Ichigo? Yoruchi picked up instantly. There's something about those two that's just off. I warned. Standard noble trickery, perhaps. Unohana suggested. I shook my head. No. Like I said, Kairaku and Byakuya taught me all the noble tricks. If it was that, I would have had us leave immediately. There's something else. Their behavior, both of them, was suspicious. I can maybe see the wife, maybe, as hitting on you or something, but the husband seemed alright, if a little understandably excited. The workcat linked her fingers behind her head. I only picked it up because I spent so much time trying to figure out people who perfected the art of manipulating others. Both of them have ulterior motives. My eyes narrowed. The thing I need to figure out is what those motives are. An intense horrible feeling manifested in my gut, one that usually warned of something bad coming. It made me worried that I had only ever gotten such an intense gut feeling from Yhwach. Oh make. The original BLD War, opening assault. With a grunt, Kenpachi ripped his blade out of the dark-skinned man he just killed. The Quincy had an annoying scream that made Kenpachi's ears bleed. Probably was one of those Sternrider people the fodder screamed about. The captain didn't give a sheet. Hey! The eye-patch-wearing man looked up to the source of the sound, seeing a woman with mostly pink hair that shifted to purple on one side. She was wearing the same clothes as the other Quincy's, and was standing with her hands at her hips a few meters away. Are you Kenpachi Zaraki? Yeah. The man grunted, before grinning as he lifted his sword. Wanna fight? The woman smirked as she raised an eyebrow, and crossed her arms over her chest. You sure you want to do that? Now Kenpachi raised an eyebrow, and felt a weird feeling in his head. Maybe it was confusion. He usually chose to ignore confusion. Why be confused about something when you can just cut it up, he reasoned. Why wouldn't I want to fight? We've captured Kurosaki Ichigo, trapped his friends in Hueco Mundo, and are tearing you guys apart like butter. Kurosaki's always beaten you in fights, hasn't he? The weird feeling intensified. If we've captured him, and we're beating everyone else, what makes you so sure that you can beat us? You've barely managed to kill one soldier, and that was one of the weak ones. Is your strength enough? Already 2 of your strongest fighters have been taken out, and sooner or later you'll be against all of us. Do you really think you can win in this situation? Now he knew he was confused. And he didn't get why he was confused, which was making him more confused. He didn't care about half the shit this woman was saying, but now he couldn't stop thinking about it. You can't even use your Zanpakuto, what can you even dash? You're making my head hurt. F off. Before the Quincy could get a single more word out, her head slipped off her neck and her body fell to the ground. Ugh, cutting you up barely did anything. Maybe finding someone strong will make my head stop hurting. Oi, Yachiru. Show me the way to the strong people. Okay, Kenny. The pink-haired girl cheered as she hopped down from wherever she was watching the fight from. Kenpachi stopped caring about where she went as soon as he felt she was out of the blast zone. He didn't know how he could always tell, but he didn't care enough to question it. I woke up to a morning so perfect that a chill went down my spine. Sure, I only slept maybe 4 hours, but it was a blissful 4 hours without nightmares. My bed was warm, and I recognized that both Yoruchi and Unohana were under the covers with me. Unohana had joined me in my bed last night, despite my mild protests, and the workcat probably just found her way there. As per usual when either was in my bed, my arms were around them as their heads rested on my chest. The goddess of Flash had her arms around my stomach, and the first Kenpachi had an arm holding both of us in her embrace. We each were clad in our sleepwear, me in sweatpants, my tank top having been discarded at my nurse's request. Yoruchi had stolen my tank top, and was most likely only wearing it. Unohana was not wearing her nightgown. She was naked. I'm sure she waited until I was asleep to strip. I did my best to ignore her state of dress, and failed miserably as she shifted in her sleep and rubbed her body against my side. Focusing on the ceiling above me didn't help anything. The raven-haired medic's right leg swung over mine and I distinctly felt that she was indeed not wearing anything. Realizing laughter was not bouncing around my head, I thanked the Soul King that Shiro was asleep. It made my predicament ever so slightly less stressful. Then I realized I was not getting any wise advice either, and cursed the man out because Asen was asleep too. My breath hitched, and my train of thought came to a screeching halt as a soft hand glided over my clothed Urkten. My brown eyes shot down to lock with amused and sadistic blue. "And what do we have here?" my nurse sultrily whispered as she slowly slid her hand along my sweat-breath-clad member. I gulped and my eyes flicked to the still dozing Yoruchi. I felt a brief moment of relief as Unohana's hand left only for my stress to come flooding back in as her hand passed under my waistband and grabbed me directly. The blanket was tossed away to only cover our feet and ankles, before her other hand came up to my left cheek and turned me to lock eyes with her again. I stifled a groan as she pulled my member out of my sweatpants, somehow managing to not change her rhythm at all as she pumped me. It was hell restraining myself as she made a show of opening her mouth and dragging her tongue across her lips in the sauciest way I had ever seen. Slowly and erotically, she leaned down and embraced my right NPL as she pressed herself as completely as she could to my side and slid down. Her soft BRSTS mashed against my torso, and I felt her nipples scrape down my body as I tried to ignore her wet PP sliding down my thigh. I grunted and my hand twitched with the effort to not give in to her as she liked and embraced DMN near every fiber of muscle she passed as she trailed down towards my crotch. It was so difficult to not give in that I couldn't even muster enough in me to get her to stop, and I could see it in her eyes that she knew it. She reached my D-, hummed in approval at my baldness, and then erotically slid her hand up as she liked the base. Pre-cum leaked from my tip, and saliva coated the bottom as she took measure to trail her tongue over every inch she could going up. As my member slowly became covered in more and more fluids, her hand pumped me in increasingly smoother strokes. She even took advantage of the fact that her fingers couldn't go all the way around to lick and slide in reverse directions, her hand coming down and passing her tongue as she slid it up. Her lust-filled eyes were locked onto mine the whole time, and it simultaneously made everything better and worse. Her right hand, which had been holding my cheek this whole time, suddenly moved, and Unohana made sure I watched it. It ghosted down my body, her fingertips brushing against my muscles and going past my thigh, before suching bodies to rest against her collarbone and teasingly dancing down. As she passed her right melons, she groped it, massaging the BRST and pinching her pink NPL before twisting and pulling it every which way. She made a show of miming softly, beckoning me to grope and mold her melons like she was doing to herself. When she let go, her NPL was slightly red and noticeably stiff. Then she slid her hand down her stomach, aiming towards her vagina before suddenly sliding it around to her backside to flatten itself against her butt. She raised it a few inches before slapping it down, a wonderfully stuck sound erupting from her action. Her hand groped her butt, making sure I could see how doughy it was, before she finally slid the hand between her thighs. She stuck the hand deeply into her core, and let out a mm so RTC and sultry that I shuddered. Yoruchi wiggled a little in her sleep at the RSNG sound, and my eyes snapped to her in panic, only for them to widen as the situation got worse. The wiggling caused my tank top to slide on her body, one of her brown nipples sliding out as the hem of the shirt rode up her hip slightly, her PP playing peekaboo as she shifted. My attention was forced back to Unohana as I felt her mouth latch onto my ball. Her eyes trapped mine again as she pumped my, wet with fluids, rhythmically and erotically. The sight of her fingers teasing my glands and her thumb rubbing my frenulum whenever her hand reached the tip pleasured me as much as the actions themselves did, and I barely suppressed a groan. All the while, her lips massaged my sack as her tongue worked wonders on my ball. I felt her smirk against my sack before she crawled between my legs. I gulped in anticipation of what she was planning, and watched with suspense as she let go of my ball with a painfully rsng sigh. Her eyes swirled with lust as she opened her mouth wide, stuck her tongue out as far as it could go, and dragged it up from the base of my PP to the tip in one of the most RTC displays she had ever done. I couldn't look away as her pink organ swirled around my tip a few times before she dropped her head an inch and sealed her lips around my glands. It was too much. Escaped my throat. Once again, Yoruchi moved in her sleep, only this time, the movement was accompanied by a light mm. A smile teased her mouth as her tongue peeked out to lick her lips. Her left melons, the one whose NPL had escaped my tank top, fully slid out of the garment as my shirt rode up to reveal her hairless vagina in all its glory. From my position, I also had a great view of her butt, and I felt cracks form in my resolve. Soft, RTC GGS filled the otherwise silent room, originating from Anohana's throat. My eye twitched in pleasure as I looked down to see her head bobbing up and down. Her eyes had not trailed from my face. It was so incredibly CC that I nearly missed her hand lifting itself from my D before going down between her legs as she raised her lower half up to her knees, proudly showing off her own amazing bottom. With ease that lied about how difficult the action truly was, she continued bobbing her head, going down an extra centimeter or two every time her head fell. The gagging only increased in volume and sensuality, and I had to bite back another as I felt her start humming as my member entered her throat. When she dropped down and swallowed my PP in its entirety, it was so RTC and pleasuring that I was startled by Yoruchi mewling in pleasure. I looked over to the mocha-skinned goddess again, quickly seeing that her naked NPL glistened with wetness. Confusion danced around my consciousness before I caught Anohana's right hand between the ex-captain's legs, 2 fingers pumping in and out of her PP furiously as her thumb rubbed the dark-skinned woman's CLT mercilessly. The first Kenpachi-umed, SNSL and RTC as possible, my D still completely sheathed in her throat. I couldn't stop my right hand from snapping out and palming the back of the raven-haired woman's head, and I sighed as I felt the corners of her mouth turn up in a smirk. Her tongue began weaving around massaging it, and my eyes snapped open to watch her as she slowly pulled my PP from her mouth, miming against my member the whole while. She stopped right before my tip slipped out from between her lips, my D glistening with her saliva in the morning light. She winked, her blue eyes nothing but pools of pure arousal, right before her head dropped to swallow every inch in one go. Something warm and soft, but firm filled my left hand, and my breath hitched in a combination of Anohana's actions and my realization that I accidentally palmed Yoruchi's butt. The ex-captain sighed in her sleep and her left leg slid over mine so that my nurse could get better access to her CNT. And the medic took the given opportunity. I saw the werecat's body twitch as Anohana pleasured her even more. Her fingers went deeper into the mocha-skinned goddess's PP, pumped faster, harder, and scissored while the raven-haired captain's thumb played with Yoruchi's CLT to the point of nearing punishment. The goddess of flash was left breathing and miming in her sleep as her hand unconsciously groped her uncovered BRST and her hips rolled with the movements of the hand bringing her to orgasm. Anohana's head bounced on my D at an equally furious pace to her ministrations with the dark-skinned woman's PP, taking everything in with every slide. It was nearly painful sking in my groans, grunts, and MMS of pleasure, but I couldn't do anything else outside of giving in. Without warning, a long and RSNG escaped Yoruchi's throat as her body spasmed violently in an action I recognized was her achieving orgasm. It was confirmed through the raven-haired medic pulling her hand out of the ex-captain's CNT with a wet sound that was unfairly RTC, glistening with the mocha-skinned woman's juices. This was soon followed by Anohana grunting on my D-, swallowing my PP violently, and making mind-numbingly stuck gagging noises before she ummed deeply. Her hips twitched in orgasm a couple times before stilling, and her eyes cleared minutely before she continued deep-throating me. My head fell back against the pillow, and I gasped. "Uno, Hannah." I grunted, barely keeping my voice down. She took that as encouragement, increasing both her pace and the sensuality of her gagging. I gripped the back of her head and forced it down as my hips lifted off the futon, and I came down her throat. Her eyes rolled back a little and she hummed appreciatively as shot after shot coated the inside of her throat and mouth white. Once I finished, I let go of her and lowered my hips, my still strong member leaving her throat. She sat there gasping for a moment while I focused on calming myself so I didn't continue. My. It seemed she was having none of it. Although I am certainly curious to learn how long you can go, you sadly have a spar you must get to soon. I blinked. Did she just let me off the hook for now? When we both knew I was maybe a shoulder bump away from saying, F it, and taking her. I looked at her. And met her eyes again as I watched her individually suck each of her glistening fingers clean in the most stuck way she could. Never mind. She was taunting me. She wanted me to cross my self-imposed line on my own. I sighed and let my head drop again as I closed my eyes. My BLD was cooling down enough that I could think clearly again. I was given barely a moment before I felt a pair of lips encircle the head of my D-. I opened my eyes and looked down at my nurse again, who released my member to speak. I'm simply cleaning it off. A dangerous smirk grew on her face. Unless you want to continue. I wouldn't mind if you decided to return the favor. I recognized the irreversible damage that had been done to my resolve as soon as I let my head flop back down so she could continue with what she had been doing. She decided to be merciful and be quick and efficient in cleaning me off. Or maybe she was playing the long game and wanted to steadily break my resolve until I gave in. Really could be either one. She liked her lips clean as she sat up, her BRSTS bouncing slightly. I carefully slid out from Yhwach and tucked my member back in my sweatpants before fixing her clothes, ignoring the wet stain near her crotch. I got off the futon and threw the blanket over the workcat and made sure she was comfortable. After, I got up and stretched before heading to the kitchen as Unohana stood before her closet. Following routine, I started a pot of coffee and grabbed some ingredients for a meal. Yhwach, king. I grunted in response. Did you jack off or something while we were sleepin'? Why? 'Cause there's a rainbow in air, and those only pop up when you get off. Despite being fully aware he could not perform such feats, I became confident that the Soul King watched my daily life for entertainment and made things happen to give himself a laugh. My evidence was Unohana walking into the kitchen the moment Shiro finished speaking in my mind, wearing my shihakusho again, only she hadn't bothered to close it. Please tell me you did what I hope you did. Or more accurately, who you did. She gave me a BLWJB while she fingered herself and Yhwach. While Yhwach was still asleep. Why the F didn't you keep going? Would you rather I F Unohana and maybe Yhwach, or fight Yama? The Zanpakuto didn't answer. He was never able to make a choice between SEC and fighting. Content that my hollow would remain silent until something else popped up. I cooked some rice. The raven-haired medic with me leaned back against the kitchen counter, crossing her arms under her bust as she smirked at me. My shihakusho only covered her left BRST, the other side had slipped away, and she was in no hurry to fix it. I glanced back at her for a moment, but once I understood she was happy to continue the silence, I returned my gaze to the breakfast I was making. In a word, the atmosphere of the room could be summarized as content. The food was easy and quick to make. The coffee was finishing up. Unohana was staring at nothing with a smile that was somewhere between satisfied and eager. I was mostly still asleep, with only the food and my nurse's presence being things I was fully aware of. Ignoring the fact that I hadn't entirely consented to the events that just occurred, it was as perfect a morning as could be. Oi, king. I raised an eyebrow, silently prompting the spirit to continue. Why did you say that Unohana gave ya a BLWJB? 'Cause she did? No. She throated ya, is what she did. That wasn't a BLWJB. Why are you hung up on it? I wanted to talk about something, but I couldn't think of anything else that wasn't serious. What about the calendar thing? I guess it'll work. What months do you think they'll have you cover? I mentally shrugged. October, maybe. My hair kind of fits with the theme. I can see it. November could work. That's got an orange theme. Well, orange is more like a fall theme, now that I think about it. Any of the fall months would work. They might have you cover multiple months. You're famous right now, and the girls said they were going fair female buyers. It'd be a good idea to have you on multiple covers. Seems like something that would make sense. You think that if they had me cover an entire season, they would have other Shinigami covering entire seasons? Depends on if they manage to get some the more sought after guys to agree. Prick would definitely be an entire season pick. He could be winter. Flowers maybe could take over summer. Dunno about spring, though. Yucatake, perhaps. He extrudes a gentle aura synonymous with spring. Wouldn't a lot of girls be turned off by the sick guy part? He's got some muscle on him. I'm sure the more tech-savvy members of the SWA could use some editing magic to make him look less about to die. Why? Shiro grunted in acceptance. It's possible, especially so due to Unohana and Yoruchi being in the SWA, that you would completely take over the calendar. I can see that. If they do, I'm demanding more pay. The food finished, and I set the table, the first Kenpachi taking a seat while finally fixing her attire. The raven-haired woman held a cup of steaming tea in her hands, and sipped it elegantly. We sat next to each other, and I added some milk to my coffee at my nurse's request. Adding flavor to your meals is a good start to easing you out of your war mentality. Help separate you from the feel of eating out of necessity. She explained. I hummed in interest and appreciation before grabbing some soy sauce and pouring a small amount over my rice. I raised my cup to my lips and took a sip. The difference in flavor was nice. A satisfied sigh filled the room as Yoruchi walked in, stretching her arms over her head with her eyes closed and a smile on her face. She was still only wearing my tank top, which came down to her mid-thigh since she was standing. Anyone else have a great night's sleep? The chocolate-skinned goddess asked. I continued drinking my coffee as I silently nodded. Indeed. Unohana smiled. You could say I woke up feeling orgasmic. I choked on my drink. Without bothering to turn her head away from the work hat, my nurse patted me on the back as I coughed. Luckily, I managed to save my coffee by placing it on the table. Oh. Is Ichigo getting all flustered by orgasms? The purple-haired woman teased. A small part of me was thankful that I was still coughing. A significantly larger part of me was grateful that she hadn't appeared to notice the wet stain on the front of my shirt. The ex-captain shook her head. Still don't understand how you've slept with two people and still turn strawberry at the mention of SEC stuff. She mumbled before taking a seat next to me and making a plate 3 times the size of Unohana's and mine combined. Once I recovered, I ate a mouthful of rice, smiling softly at the extra flavor. I took a glance at Yoruchi's plate, already halfway gone, and remembered a time in which I was able to eat like that. A frown formed at how distant the memory seemed to be, before I cheered myself up with the thought that I would be able to again. There was no war. There was no constant fear of an enemy appearing at any given moment. I didn't have to forego actually living in favor of being a machine. I could spare the time to enjoy things. My smile returned and I downed another mouthful, taking the time to savor the taste. I found I could take another bite. As well as a fourth. I felt the air grow warmer, and I glanced up to see both women grinning at me. They didn't need to say. They were happy seeing me eat double my normal amount, I could see it in their eyes. I took another sip of my coffee, and sighed at the flavor. Once we finished eating, we all got dressed, and the armor and clothing I had gotten from Senjumaru had never felt as comfortable. When we left, I took a cup of coffee with me. With the sun already turning the sky purple and red, we journeyed toward Sokayaku Hill. Zangetsu manifested with us, Shiro smiling appreciatively as his hands slipped into his pockets and Asen's lips curling up at the edges as his features softened. Yoruchi climbed onto my shoulders and toyed with my hair as Unohana claimed my empty left hand. I thought about slipping my hand out of her hold, then decided I didn't care about restraining myself right now. I entangled my fingers with hers, earning an appealing smile from her that was heightened by the glow of the rising sun. We found ourselves atop the hill before we really realized it. The captain of the 4th Division nodded for me to take the lead, so I handed her my half-empty cup. Curiosity dancing in her eyes, she took it and watched as I lifted Yoruchi from my shoulders. I sat down with my left knee up and my right leg spread out in front of me, and lowered the workat so she was seated at my right. She leaned into my side with her legs folded under her, and I pat the ground to my left for Unohana to join. She did, resting her head against my left shoulder, and my left arm wrapped around her as she returned my coffee to my right hand. Shiro came forward and curled up with his head in Yoruchi's lap and his back to my leg. The woman's eyes shined and she reached out to pass her fingers through his bleached hair. He made a noise similar to a purr. Old man stood behind me, and I leaned back into his legs. The sun was rising before us, and once again, I couldn't help but smile as the unforgettable sight returned. I inhaled slowly and deeply, held it in for just a moment, and let it out just as slowly. "This habit you wish to form," my nurse spoke up, "is one I believe the whole of the Siriidae should partake in." She finished her statement with a tranquil exhale. "Yeah." I breathed. "Especially with the training we're all going to go through." The ex-captain nodded against my side. We stayed until the stars disappeared, and yellow overtook the sky. Shiro was the first to move, sitting up with half-lidded eyes as he reached up to scratch his head before slapping his hand down. Whenever someone played with his hair, he usually tried to keep it how they left it for as long as possible. Yoruchi and Unohana were the next to move, standing and stretching their legs lightly as I hopped to my feet. Asen returned to my inner world as Shiro climbed to a stand. I raised an eyebrow. "I'm spendin' the day with Witch," the hollow announced. I smiled and patted his shoulder to wish him luck. Unlike last time, Shiro had a bit of a hurdle to overcome before he became friends with her. He nodded before walking off. Sure, he didn't care about whether most Shinigami were afraid of him or not, but he didn't want people setting off alarms or attacking him when he just wanted to talk to someone. "So, what are we doing?" the workat asked. "I'm about to help out Yamamoto, you two can do whatever." "I'm interested to see your Bankai," my nurse announced, to Yoruchi's nod of agreement. I blinked before sighing. "You can stay to see the release, but you'll have to leave once the fighting starts. No offense to either of you, but it takes a lot of power to be around me when I'm fighting in Bankai. Even if you two got twice as strong, you wouldn't be able to stay standing when I unleash an attack. Then we'll just admire you from afar." The ex-captain grinned. "When I said, you'll have to leave, I meant leave the Mukin." I clarified. "Sure, I'm not going to be releasing anything all that powerful for a while, but the dimension is gonna be unstable just from he and I being in Bankai. I'll be limiting the spars between us to once a week just to give the Mukin enough time to pull itself back together." The eyes of the two women before me widened. They exchanged a glance. "We'll wait outside, then?" the head of the Shihoin clan asked. I nodded. "That'll work." "Great." The workat grinned. "Now, what does your Bankai do?" "I'll explain once Yama is there to hear it." "Ah, fine. Let's hurry then." The goddess of Flash urged as she went behind me and pushed against my back. Unohana giggled when she saw I wasn't moving. I chuckled before stepping forth in Shuunpa. The two immediately followed, and we appeared in front of Yamamoto's office just as Chojiro opened the doors, holding a pot of tea. "Ah, Kurosaki-san, Anohana Taicho, Shihoin-san." Yamamoto Sutecho is waiting. Great. I smiled before helping the white-haired man into the office. Just as the lieutenant informed us, the head captain was on his feet, staring out at the Soul Society with his Haori folded next to his desk and his sheathed sword in his hand for all to see. He turned to us, more specifically me, as we walked in. He glanced at Yoruchi and Unohana for only a moment. Come. The guards to the Mukin are waiting for us. He announced before taking a step towards us. Will Shunpa there? I spoke up. It'll be the only warm-up you'll get before we start. The bearded captain glared at me for a moment, before slowly nodding his head in acceptance. We were off, Yoruchi right behind me with Yamamoto a little ways behind her and Unohana a hair slower than he. We startled the guards when we appeared before them without warning. Open it. The ancient captain ordered as he freed his Zanpakuto from its sheath. Instantly, the room grew warm from the excitement of the sword, eager to finally be used in battle after so long. The doors opened, and we entered. Yamamoto lagged behind only because he had one of the guards hold his sheath for him. The women with us looked around. Ha! I kinda pictured it more hellish. The workcat hummed. Like fire and brimstone hellish or actual hell hellish? I asked. Fire and brimstone. She confirmed. I passed my eyes over the environment. I can see it. We are here to spar, not socialize. Yamamoto growled as he walked past us. I rolled my eyes. Hold on a sec. The man looked at me over his shoulder. Yoruchi and Unohana are just here to see my Bankai and leave, so let me explain what it does. Grunting, he turned around to face me as the women focused on me. You know the power of my Shirkai. I started. I can use the basic powers of Shinigami, Hollows, and Quincy. In my Bankai, I can combine those techniques, which increase in power multiplicatively. I also gain access to the Quincy and Arankar variants of Bankai, being Volstandig and Resurrection respectively. Until I think you're ready for them, I won't be using any combined attacks or secondary forms. That's basic, but really powerful. The mocha-skinned goddess gaped. My Zanpakuto in a nutshell. I monotoned. I drew my blade, and held it out in front of me in a kendo stance. Get ready, my Bankai release is a lot more explosive than my Shirkai. The head captain prepared the best, by stabbing the tip of Ryujin Jaka into the ground. Unohana and Yoruchi grabbed onto each other and kneeled to the ground. Seeing that would be the best they could do in the current circumstances, I closed my eyes. I sucked in a breath and let it out, feeling Zangetsu's excitement at being fully released fill my body. My eyes snapped open, glowing with a swirl of black, blue, and red. Ryatsu. Bankai. I whispered. The energy contained within my body exploded out in a tidal wave, swallowing the trio in front of me and sending the women skidding backwards from the sheer force. Yama fared better, but he was still pushed back a couple feet. A couple rock formations in my immediate vicinity disintegrated instantly, and some a few feet away cracked and fell over. The released energy swirled around in a massive tornado of black, red, and blue as my blade transformed, combining into otherworldly black and vicious purple. Once my weapon stabilized, I brought it back, the chain rattling a little before I swiped my blade forward. The resulting force was enough to expel the tornado of Ryatsu and reveal my form to those before me. Unlike my false Bankai, my real Bankai did not transform my clothes. Only my blade changed, and it became even larger than my false Shirkai blade. If I were to stand it up at the tip, it would probably prove to be taller than I. The handle was solid black and almost as long as my arm, and the center of the blade was black. White formed the edge, which not only extended past the blade to cover the hilt, but also looped around the back. A black chain extended from the back of the point of the blade to the bottom of the extension in front of the handle. Tensa Zangetsu. Whoa! Yoruchi breathed. That was some release. I raised the blade to rest it on my shoulder. The weapon was as wide as my torso, so it remained where I rested it with minor difficulty. It was meant to annihilate anything and everything I deemed a threat, so it was understandable that it wasn't the most comfortable on my shoulder. Yup. Now hurry on out. I ordered. They did as told, leaving quickly. Yamamoto and I watched each other until the doors to the Mukin shut. As the sound echoed through the realm, the ancient captain leveled his blade at me. Bankai. His release was just as powerful as mine, a wave of incredible heat washing over the realm. Immediately, my nose and throat burned as the heated air passed through them. I got cotton mouth, despite the fact that I hadn't even parted my lips. I had to blink my eyes a few times before I became accustomed to the sudden dryness. The ground around him became covered in soot, and I saw a couple broken rocks from my release catch fire. It was a work of art, seeing soot form along his blade from cross guard to point as smoke began to billow out from the blade. Zenka no Tachi. I am ready for you, Kurosaki. I snorted, which was really uncomfortable due to my nostrils burning from the heat. No, you're not. I slid my blade off my shoulder, purposely slamming it down on the ground. A small crater formed, and cracks spread across the ground just out of its radius. The bearded captain's eyes snapped to the damage before returning to me. Surely you know me well enough to understand intimidation is useless. Who said that was intimidation? I asked. What else could it be? He grumbled. I smirked. The starting bell. I brought my right foot forward, dragging my bankai behind me for a moment before I swung upwards. Getsuga Tensho. The fire wielder's eyes widened before he shunpaed to the right of the wall of black. Once he got his footing, he brought his blade up in a horizontal slash. Zenka no Tachi, North, Tenchi Kaijin. A grin formed on my face as I dropped my sword arm. The wave of pure unmatched heat hit me full force, and the ancient captain blinked at my seeming stupidity. Everything from my collarbone to my waist incinerated, but before the head captain even began to process that fact, I activated my high-speed Reizotengai. Strings of blue shot out from my body to connect them all as bone, muscle, organs and nerves erupted from my neck, waist, and forearms. Before Yamamoto's arm stopped moving from performing his North technique, I was already back in pristine condition. Well, except for my clothes, but those would fix themselves if given enough time. Shock filled my sparring partner's face as he processed everything that just happened. I mentioned that you are the only one in the Soul Society that I would need to use my bankai against. As happy as seeing Yamamoto that shock got me, I had to steel myself to continue with his training. The reason for that, the only reason, is because my regeneration in Shirkai can't keep up with your ability to incinerate sheet. If it weren't for that, I would be taking you on with my Shirkai so I wouldn't run the risk of accidentally killing you. You wield that much destructive power? The ancient captain inquired. I began sauntering towards him. In short, yes. Black Ryatsu rippled off my blade as I held it with both hands like an executioner would his axe. Now try not to die. I disappeared in my special Shinido technique. I reappeared above him with Tensa Zangetsu raised over my head. He barely dodged, and would have retaliated had I not set off a Getsuga into the ground. My immediate vicinity exploded with ebony energy and my opponent was sent flying away with his left arm protecting his eyes from debris. I didn't give him a moment to breath, shooting off after him with more Ryatsu forming a trail behind me. I slashed diagonally and he twisted out of the way only for my right leg to swing out at his side. I was moving fast enough for the hit to connect, but I watched in slow motion as the skin of my leg blackened, crisped, and flaked away, followed by my muscle and then bone. Time sped up again as Yamamoto was tossed away and my leg fully reformed almost as soon as it was out of the heat field permanently hanging around the head captain in his bankai. I let go with my left hand to pat away the flames that burst into existence along my breathe leg. My hand returned and I swung out, a violet blast erupting from my bankai. Zero. It was as wide as a full-powered Gran Ray Zero in Shirkai, and was just as, if not faster than the attack in question. My opponent was swallowed up near instantly. Zenka no Tachi, North, Tenchi Kaijin. A wave of heat cut through my Zero heading for me, and I ducked under it before launching forward with violet Ryatsu soaking my blade. Once the bearded captain, covered in marks from my attacks, was a few meters away, I stomped my left foot to keep me from moving forward and stabbed my monstrous blade forward. Licked Regan. A hurricane of indigo arrows so densely packed together it formed a wall shot out of my blade for Yamamoto, who darted to the left as fast as he could. He got out of the way of most of the torrent, but a few arrows managed to leave gashes on his back and arms. He brought his charred blade in front of him and wrapped both hands around the hilt before slashing wildly in my direction, sending near-invisible scythes of heat flying towards me. Without hesitation, I charged at them. Black wreathed my bankai as blade upon blade of pure heat tore through me, leaving gaping holes as they cut through my body that closed before BLD even got a chance to spill. There was no pain, through a combination of the heat burning my nerves away and the wounds healing so quickly that there was no chance for pain to register. I was before the ancient captain in no time, and we sliced at each other simultaneously. He cut from my left hip to the right side of my head, through my rising left forearm. Everything close to the cut turned to ash, only for the ash to be pushed out of the way as strings of blue, slivers of bone, and fibers of muscle reached out and knitted together behind the strike. It was weird. Missing my right eye for half a second. It was almost like winking with my right eye, but if I lost sensation in my eye while doing so. Tensa Zangetsu rose up and cut into Yamamoto's left side, but only went a few inches deep before the old man retreated. It was difficult to properly chase him while still striking because he had severed my left wrist from the rest of my arm, making me lose a lot of power and precision. Which was fine, because I made up the difference with my typical excessive Ryatsu. Getsuga Tensho. Still a little off balance, I was sent skidding back as black energy fired out from my blade like a fire hose. I still hit the bearded captain, however. He was sent tumbling back, and raised himself into a kneel as smoke rose from his bleeding body. "You fight recklessly," he growled, breathing. I shook my left hand before flexing it to make sure everything was working properly. Luckily it was, so I didn't have to remake the cut so it could heal correctly. "That's not recklessness," I explained. "Especially against opponents more skilled than I, bulldozing through attacks is a good way to catch someone off guard. You'd be amazed how much people plan around their enemy dodging." He grunted in what seemed like appreciation of my strategy. We both stood without further conversation before continuing with the spar. It was relieving to in some sense be able to let loose, by not having to fear for my sparring partner's health whenever I released a Ryatsu attack, even if I did have to limit what attacks I used. I'm sure it was also relieving for Yamamoto, to be able to let loose everything he had without having to spare any mind to questioning if I could take it. I lunged at him. He dodged to the left of my downward slash and was thoroughly caught off guard when my hand speared out to palm his face, which started to feel really weird as my muscles burned away, before chucking him as far as I could. I allowed my bankai to trail behind me as I launched after him, holding my smoking left hand out as skin grew back over. The weirdest part of regenerating hands and feet was definitely the feeling when my nails came back. It was just uncomfortable. I shunidoed in front of the ancient captain, who instinctively struck out with Zenka no Tachi as Tensa Zangetsu rushed forward. There was an eruption of smoke as the blades collided and the metal screamed against each other from the heat. We both retreated instantly, him cradling one of his ears while I just waited for mine to heal. I reached out with my Ryatsu sense, and could have sworn his was higher than normal. Only one way to find out. "Here's your first test, Yama," I shouted, shifting to a wide stance with Tensa Zangetsu behind me for an upward slash. "Send it at me, Kurosaki. I shall best it." By the wide grin on his face, I'd say he certainly felt like he shook some of the rust off. Black and violet Ryatsu coated my blade excitedly, and I shouted out the name of the attack as I brought forth my Bankai. Getsuga Siro. A wave of ebony and indigo screamed out of my weapon with the power of a nuclear warhead. Any and all rock formations in its path were erased by the Ryatsu. A trench as wide and deep as a city block formed in the wake of the tsunami of destruction. Gale force winds whipped at me, strong enough to leave lacerations on my body that healed instantly. The already insanely high temperature skyrocketed in response. Zenka no Tachi, North, Tenchi Kaijin. Mountains, boulders, large outcroppings of rock that flanked us were all incinerated above shoulder level by an intense slash of unrivaled heat. It clashed against the tidal wave of energy so violently that an explosion great enough to eradicate a major city erupted. I was sent flying due to the sheer force but managed to correct myself and land on my feet without any issue and a smile splitting my face. He certainly wasn't at the level to leave Yhwach in some sort of Quincy super coma, but he definitely was stronger than I had ever seen him. I laughed and brought Tensa Zangetsu up to rest on my shoulder again. That's all for today. I shouted, using my left hand to cup my mouth. I realized that my body was covered in soot and ash. Looks like we've already got some progress on shaking the rust off. Then we will continue this exercise some other time. The wielder of Ryujin Jaka announced as he shunpaed over to me. I nodded as we both sealed our Zanpakuto. We'll do it once a week, to give Muken enough time to pull itself back together. In the meantime, I need some water and a bath. I breathed out. The bearded man looked down at himself, finding his shihakusho was hanging in taters on his body and his hakama were barely better. Like me, soot covered his body, unable to be washed away by our sweat because it was too hot to sweat. As do I, it seems. I am grateful to find an opponent like you. I can relieve the stress of being head captain upon you without repercussion. The F, you mean, without repercussion? You use me like a stress ball, and I use you right back, you got that? I snapped. All the better. The ancient captain chuckled. It would be boring to have a practice dummy that doesn't hit back. Oi, this sheet's the other way around. I'm the one that has to hold back so I don't accidentally break you. He laughed heartily. It seems my years are coming back to me just as my skill and power is. Don't ignore me. I can still get Suga your butt. Although I was outwardly angry, I was inwardly laughing right along with him. We continued our light banter until we reached the door, and by then, my right breath leg had regrown back down to just below my knee. It would be at least another half hour before I could even attempt to slip on my shihakusho, almost all of it having been burned away in the beginning of the spar. I pounded my fist against the door as a form of knocking, and they were quickly pulled open. Yoruchi, Unohana, and the guards all gaped in shock at Yamamoto's and I's appearances. What happened to your clothes? My nurse asked. Oh, Yamamoto incinerated my torso. One of the guards fell on his butt in shock. And your breathes? Yoruchi questioned. Oh, I kicked him, and it burned away my leg up to my thigh. How? One of the guards still standing whispered. My Bankai lets me heal from nearly anything, and Yamamoto's Bankai can incinerate nearly anything. Why you made the head captain use Bankai? A third guard asked. You should be more shocked that he managed to make me use Bankai. I corrected. Ichigo, your strength is still mostly an unknown in the Soul Society. Unohana reasoned. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I realized. On to more important matters, I really need a shower and some water. I will assist you. The raven-haired medic declared. Can I join? The workcat queried. Sure. I shrugged. Yes. The mocha-skinned goddess cheered.